Chapter 19:13. Phew. In the tent, the robust man who had eaten his fill exhaled a long breath. He did not mind the blood in his mouth and treated it like soup. He wiped it all over his face. As he wiped it, he muttered to himself in a coarse voice. Even though the portion is sufficient, it's still the meat of a normal beast. It's tasteless. It can't even be compared to the trash outside. Human meat is still better. The robust man grinned as he spoke, as if he was reminiscing about something. Come to think of it, after the invasion of Ailu Empire, he must have enjoyed the flesh of many unlucky people who fell into the tiger's mouth. But it was only a few days ago that the muscular man was able to enjoy a good meal. Ever since Ailu Empire transferred all the resources and manpower from the cities, the muscular man didn't manage to catch a single human. There are so many humans in that broken city, yet I can't even enjoy a good meal. How annoying. The muscular man didn't look as cold as the Beast King. His personality was a little rough. He cursed and swore. After staying here for so many days, I really don't know when I'll be able to destroy that city. Humans are too stubborn. Can't they just be obedient and become food? How dare they resist? They don't know what's good for them. Might as well just crush that city. Of course, that's what he said. But the muscular man didn't dare to do so. The muscular man clearly remembered when the beast god bestowed him with the power of a false god, allowing him to be reborn and lead the demonic beast army to attack Ailu Empire. Before he arrived, the beast god had solemnly warned him not to act rashly and provoke the humans' capital. That's because there's a demigod guardian god residing in each of the 3 capital cities of the 3 empires. The muscular man knew that with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He wouldn't be able to fight against the guardians of Ailu Empire. He didn't know how long the beast god had ascended to demigod rank. His current strength is definitely not as simple as a demigod. The muscular man knew his family's strength. Naturally, he also knew that he, who took a shortcut, wouldn't be a match for the veteran guardian god. The Beast King also knew this. That's why he ordered the 3 Beast Kings to lead the demonic beast army to attack the human world. As for other matters, they could do whatever they wanted. However, once they encountered the 3 protectors of the 3 empires, it would be fine if they were entangled, but they couldn't continue fighting. Otherwise, they would definitely die a horrible death. If it was just a simple entanglement. Even if the 3 Beast Kings were only half-baked pseudo-Beast Kings, as long as the 3 guardian gods were not demigod pinnacle, there would not be much of a problem. The Beast King had never expected these 3 fake Beast Kings to defeat the 3 guardian deities. His main goal was to let these 3 fake Beast Kings hold back the 3 guardian deities and lead the magical beast army to attack the human world. In that case, if the guardian deity was entangled with the fake Beast King, it wouldn't be too difficult for the magical beasts, who were generally stronger and more numerous than humans, to win. Therefore, no matter how impatient the strong man was, he had to endure it. At the very least, he had to endure it and not take the initiative to attack. Of course, that was because the strong man did not know that the protectors of the 3 empires were no longer in Monarch City. Otherwise, he would not have been able to stop himself from attacking and destroying the entire Monarch City. If only those trash of the same race could take down that broken city by themselves. The robust man snorted coldly. Otherwise, if those 2 fellows beat me to it, I would definitely be laughed at. The magical beasts were not truly united. It was a relationship between the hunter and the hunted. If they were not of the same species, who would part on good terms? This time, the 3 pseudo-Beast Kings that the Beast King bestowed with the power of the false gods were all different kinds of magical beasts. Moreover, before they obtained the power of the false gods and shed their beast bodies, they were still magical beasts at the peak of the 9th rank. The 3 pseudo-Beast Kings had fought more than once over food, territory, and other issues. Of course, the relationship between the 3 fake Beast Kings was not any better. This time, the magical beasts had attacked the 3 empires. If the strong man was the last to succeed, he would definitely be laughed at in front of the other 2 fake Beast Kings in the future. He would also be subjected to a lot of cold words in the future. He might even lose the trust of the beast god in his heart. That was something the strong man would never allow. Thinking of this, the strong man narrowed his eyes. A dark light that represented negative emotions flashed across his beastly eyes. One must know that the power of the fake god would not only turn the user into a monster, it would also affect the user's mental state to a certain extent. Back then, whether it was Marcus or Bing Mian, after using the power of the fake god, the dark and ugly side of their hearts were completely exposed. The strong man was also affected. Even the Beast King was not immune. Otherwise, with the Beast King's cold personality, he would not have been so angry when he was sealed. However, magical beasts were originally much more bloodthirsty and cruel than humans. Therefore, in their opinion, this effect was probably not an effect at all, right? I must speed up the process. The dark emotions in the strong man's eyes subsided. He reached out his hand, wanting to take the porcelain pot filled with water that was placed beside him. However, he suddenly felt a cold sensation on his head. The strong man's eyes immediately became alert. He abruptly raised his head and looked up. In the next moment, a few drops of cold water fell on the strong man's face, startling him slightly. It was only then that the strong man discovered that there were a few medium-sized holes on the top of his tent. Outside the holes, drops of water continued to drip in. There was also a whoosh sound outside the tent, causing the strong man to frown. Rain? It was indeed rain. The whoosh sound was the sound of the rain. The drops of water that caused the strong man's vigilance were naturally the rainwater that leaked into the tent. Human things are really useless. The strong man shifted his position with an unhappy expression. He reached out to grab the porcelain pot again. If I had known this would happen, I would have just found a cave to rest in. Why would I use a human tent? However, the strong man did not notice that a lot of the water that leaked in from outside the tent spilled into the porcelain pot. No, the strong man actually noticed this, but he did not pay it any mind. After all, rainwater could also be drunk, right? What the strong man did not notice was that among the rainwater that spilled into the porcelain pot, there was a drop of water with a different color that also dripped into the pot. At that moment, the strong man straightforwardly poured all the water in the porcelain pot into his mouth and swallowed it into his stomach. In the next moment, the strong man felt an indescribable pain in his stomach. The robust man's complexion changed drastically. Without the slightest hesitation, he swung his hand heavily, and the porcelain pot in his hand flew away. Bang! When the sound of the porcelain pot breaking resounded throughout the tent, the robust man's body began to twitch. His face began to turn black and purple. At this moment, even if the strong man was stupid, he realized it. He was poisoned. Bang! Just as the robust man's face turned black and purple, the side of the tent suddenly exploded. A figure wrapped in a swirling airflow rushed towards the robust man with a fierce collision sound. Looking at the figure that rushed towards him, the strong man's pupils shrunk slightly. He finally understood. He was plotted against. "You're courting death," the strong man furiously roared. At the same time, a turbid black gas surged out from his body. He raised his huge fist and fiercely punched the figure that rushed towards him. Whoosh! The sturdy man's physical strength was clearly at the top level, even among the magical beasts. The heavy punch that was thrown out was mixed with a violent sonic boom and the sound of wind. In just a blink of an eye, it was like a cannonball that heavily bombarded the figure that was rushing over. PFFF. Even after receiving the strong man's ferocious blow, the expected tangible feeling did not reach the strong man's nerves. There was not even the slightest sound of collision. Under the bombardment of the huge fist, the figure that was rushing over actually trembled violently. Then, under the strong man's narrowed pupils, the figure directly dissipated with a strange sound. Although he had not been in human form for a long time and had not fought with humans for a long time, the strong man, who had fought with other magical beasts in the behemoth forest, knew what was going on in the next second. An afterimage, just as his voice fell, another figure that was exactly the same as before, covered in a whirlwind like a ghost, flashed behind the strong man. Chapter 1914. Boom! In the forest in the middle of the night, a loud and violent sound suddenly resounded, frightening the patrolling magical beasts in the forest. Then, all of them roared angrily. That's because the explosion came from the only tent they were guarding. Boom! However, before the group of magical beasts could gather in the direction of the tent that was the size of a normal house suddenly exploded, turning into pieces of cloth that scattered in all directions with traces of smoke. Within the tent that had exploded, two figures faced each other at an extremely fast speed, as if repelling each other, and flew away. Boom, 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 with a series of muffled stomping sounds. One of the two figures that flew backward continuously stomped on the ground with his thick feet. While stomping on the ground, the figure that flew backward gradually stabilized. When he completely stabilized his body, a burly man like a bear raised his head, revealing a greenish-black face that was filled with rage. Whoosh! Before the other figure could land on the ground, a figure with pure white wings descended from the sky and caught him in his arms. Then, he circled and landed beside the other three figures who had appeared out of nowhere. Needless to say, they were Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sayai, Takitsubu Riku, Frenda, and Astria. After the man was poisoned, the one who ambushed him was Kinuhata Sayai, and it was Kinuhata Sayai who was strengthened by Takitsubu Riku's ability. The afterimage that appeared before Kinuhata Sayai's ambush was Shokuho Misaki's doing. To be precise, it wasn't an afterimage. It was just an illusion created by Shokuho Misaki's mind control. But even with Takitsubu Riku's buff and Shokuho Misaki's camouflage, Kinuhata Sayai's ambush was noticed by the man, and he managed to counterattack. While facing the man's counterattack, Kinuhata Sayai was no match for him. Thus, Frenda threw a bomb doll into the tent and blew it up, allowing Kinuhata Sayai to escape. In other words, the assassination attempt by the group of girls had failed. No, well, it wasn't a failure. At least, the man was indeed poisoned by Shokuho Misaki's water vapor. When it started to rain, the poison mixed into the rain and sprinkled into the water that the strong man drank. That poison. It's the poison Shokuho Misaki asked Sylph and Feifei to prepare. It's the most potent poison in the Spalier world. Under the influence of the violent poison, the robust man's body was constantly on the verge of collapse. His face was constantly alternating between green and black, but the robust man still managed to hold on. Looking at the group of girls in front of him, a furious and ferocious roar suddenly rang out. "Humans, you're courting death. Roar, roar, roar." At this moment, the magical beasts in the forest were all roaring and rushing over in a frenzy. "Capture them, dead or alive." The strong man's roar resounded through the entire forest. Just as the strong man's roar fell, many black shadows shot out from the sky and trees surrounding the group of girls. Among them were the 10 Class 9 demonic beasts. Looking at the numerous, huge black shadows that were shooting towards them from all directions, the expressions of the group of young ladies changed slightly. With the help of the system, the girls could clearly sense that there were more than 10 Class 9 demonic beasts. There are also countless Class 8 demonic beasts. Even if Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sayai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria worked together, they had no choice but to retreat. But even if the girls wanted to retreat, the demonic beasts wouldn't let them. The magical beasts here had already surrounded the entire forest, so as soon as they came out, the flying magical beasts blocked the sky, and the surrounding magical beasts also rushed over. There was no way out. Therefore, if the girls wanted to escape, they could only force their way through. "Astria-chan!" Shokuho Misaki shouted. Astria raised her head abruptly. A sci-fi illusory frame appeared in her crimson eyes. An angelic halo appeared above her head. She flapped her pure white wings and shot into the air. The girls hurriedly followed. "Stop them! Kill them!" The strong man who was on the verge of collapse roared. "Roar! Roar! Woo!" All of a sudden, the eyes of the surrounding magical beasts glowed with a ferocious light. Their beast-like pupils were dyed red. One by one, The magical beast roared and madly charged towards a group of girls. Astrea flapped her pure white wings and dodged the charge of a Tier 9 demonic beast. She swung her laser sword at the head of a Tier 8 demonic beast that was following behind her. The Tier 8 flying demonic beast didn't even have the chance to react to Astrea's all-out attack. Her sword flashed, and the demonic beast's head was severed from its neck. Blood splattered down from the sky. Astrea's crimson eyes turned even colder after killing the Tier 8 demonic beast. She charged towards the swarm of flying demonic beasts. Laser swords and laser swords sliced through the bodies of the demonic beasts like they were dried twigs. Blood splattered everywhere, and severed limbs fell to the ground like garbage. It didn't take long for a gap to open up in the sky above the army of flying magical beasts that blotted out the sky. Astrea led the way while Kinuhata Sai carried Takitsubu Riku in her arms. Shokuho Misaki and Frenda were also granted the ability to fly by Takitsubu Riku. They followed behind Astrea and charged out of the monster encirclement. Kill them all! Kill them all! Unable to accept the fact that he had been tricked by a few human girls, the robust man's furious roar continued. Roar! While the rank 8 demonic beast was unable to stop Astrea, a rank 9 demonic beast with the ability to fly charged out. It spun in the air and rammed into Astrea with its jaws wide open. Clang! In the next second, Astrea's laser sword clashed with the Tier 9 demonic beast's fangs. A violent shockwave erupted between the two. Astrea was unaffected by the impact, but she only trembled a little. On the other hand, the Tier 9 demonic beast was sent flying as though it was struck by a heavy blow. If an outsider were to see this scene, they would definitely be so terrified that they would not be able to control themselves. A demonic beast was competing with a human in terms of physical strength. It was a competition of physical strength against a human of the same rank and level. Yet, it was sent flying in just one round. Of course, even though Astrea managed to send the Tier 9 demonic beast flying, she was stopped by the demonic beast for a brief moment. The brawny man who had been glaring at Astrea suddenly stood up. He raised his fist like an arrow leaving the bowstring. Black energy swirled around his fist and transformed into a ferocious beast paw that covered his fist. Human, die. The muscular man's speed was fast. At the very least, the muscular man caught up with Astrea in an instant. It took Astrea quite a bit of time to open up some distance between them. Feeling the danger coming from behind them, the faces of the group of girls turned grave. Let me do it. Kinuhata Sai threw Takitsubu Riku to Frenda. She dove down and raised her fist as well. A circle of air condensed around her fist. In the next moment, the black beast's palm collided with the petite fist that was surrounded by the atmosphere. Boom! The loud explosion was like a clap of thunder, reverberating in the sky above the forest. Roar! 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 A violent gust of wind spread out at an extremely fast speed, blowing away all the surrounding magical beasts for a short distance. The battle continued. Chapter 19:15. Boom! Amidst the shockingly loud noise, the turbulent shock wave was like a surging wave. With a rumbling sound, it surged out crazily like a tidal wave and spread out in all directions. Under such an astonishing collision, the entire space in the forest slightly trembled. Some of the trees that were closer to the collision were even blown apart by the wind and waves. Cracks appeared on the tree trunks, emitting a ka-ka-ka-ka sound that made one's scalp tingle. The shock waves continued to reverberate, endlessly spreading outwards. The speed at which they spread was extremely quick. Within a few breaths, they had devoured the magical beasts that had just surrounded them as if they were food. Puchi! In the next moment, many of the magical beasts that were affected were sent flying as if they had been hit by a heavy blow, leaving a trail of blood behind them. They heavily smashed into the ground, either breaking trees or brushing past the ground as they flew backwards, leaving streaks of blood behind. It was a ghastly sight. Roar! 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 The shockwave almost affected the entire forest, causing the demonic beasts that were lucky enough not to be affected to let out roars of fear. Not for any other reason, but because of this collision, the demonic beasts felt a fear that spread from the depths of their souls. That was the fear of death. It was just a ripple effect. The demonic beasts smelled the scent of death. Even the 10th ranked demonic beasts couldn't help but retreat, not daring to be affected by the shockwave. In an instant, the sky that was filled with flying demonic beasts a second ago was emptied out. On the other side, Kinyahatasai and the robust man, who had made the right move and caused this scene, weren't in a good state either. Kinyahatasai could only feel an extremely violent force, so violent that it was almost impossible to resist, assaulting her from the fist that she had swung out. It viciously slammed into her body, causing her to let out a muffled groan. Her petite figure quickly retreated. Compared to Kinyahatasai, who shot out like a bullet, the robust man only took a few steps back. Drops of blood dripped down from his thick fist. On his rugged face, the green and black hue deepened. Obviously, this was a head-on collision. Not only did he force Kinyahatasai back, the poison in the robust man's body spread even more. His body that was floating in the air shook violently, as if he was being blown by a gust of wind. However, looking at the robust man, other than Astria, who went to catch Kinyahatasai, the rest of the girls were shocked. The poison that the robust man consumed was the most potent poison in the world. According to SYLPH and Fei, it was the most potent poison in Silveria. It could even kill a Tier 9 powerhouse in an instant. It has been 3 minutes since the robust man was poisoned. Yet the robust man didn't die from the poison. Instead, he seized the opportunity to charge forward and almost checkmated the girls. Even though demonic beasts were much more resistant to poison than humans, a poison that could kill a Tier 9 powerhouse might not be able to kill a demigod beast king. Shokuho Misaki did not expect to be able to kill a strong man with her poison. She didn't expect a robust man to still have the energy to attack. A demigod beast king was already this terrifying. Then, how strong would a demigod beast king be? Of course, while she was shocked, Shokuho Misaki also became more certain. If she didn't get rid of the robust man, the Ailu Empire would be destroyed if he found out that the guardian deity wasn't here. Shokuho Misaki gritted her teeth. Tiny stars lit up in her eyes, and a strange ripple appeared around her body. Under the effect of this circle of ripples, the surrounding magical beasts that had once again surrounded him froze. Their beastly eyes were completely replaced by starry eyes. Immediately after, they turned their heads and, with a ferocious expression, pounced on the strong man who was floating in midair and was on the verge of collapse due to the poison. What? Even the robust man didn't expect that a fellow member of his race, whom he regarded as trash, would actually disobey the order of a beast king and attack him instead. This caused the robust man to be slightly stunned. When the robust man reacted, a terrifying anger and murderous aura emerged on his face. How dare you? Along with the roar of the strong man, a burst of thick black fog burst out from his body, and with a spiral, it turned into a pitch-black ring and fiercely shook the surroundings. The pitch-black ring was like the sharpest blade in the world. As it spread in all directions, it swept past the ferocious magical beasts. Immediately after, the magical beasts were all cut in half at the waist. Their bodies fell to the ground with blood filling the sky. Shokuho Misaki knew that controlling the demonic beasts that even Astria couldn't handle to attack the robust man wouldn't work. Her glowing eyes flickered, and she revealed a determined expression. Kinuhita, Frenda, Takitsubu, Astria-chan. Using her mind control ability, Shokuho Misaki kept the demonic beasts at bay while transmitting her words into the minds of Kinuhita Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria. I will restrain the demonic beasts around here. You guys take advantage of the fact that the guardian deity king is poisoned to kill him. Kinuhita, Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria's heart skipped a beat, but they didn't hesitate. Astrea, who was slaughtering the demonic beasts around her, immediately turned around and charged at the robust man. Kinuhita clenched her fists tightly as a chaotic and majestic air current shuttled back and forth in her hands. Then, with a slight movement of her delicate body, she charged towards the muscular man. Seeing Astrea and Kinuhita charging towards him, the muscular man, who was in pain due to the poison, laughed angrily. Instead of retreating, he charged towards them with a gait that could shake the ground and shake the mountains. Relying on his bulky body, he charged towards them as well. A pair of hands that were harder than hammers and bigger than earthenware pots emitted dense black energy. The muscular man swung his fist at Astrea, who was the first to arrive in front of him. Clang! It was a laser lightsaber that met the fist of the robust man, which was surrounded by black gas. In the crisp sound of metal clashing, Astrea's laser lightsaber and the robust man's fist collided. Sparks flew everywhere. Shing! At the same time, Kinuhita petite body shot towards the muscular man like a spring. A blurry shadow appeared in front of the muscular man, and a pair of petite fists smashed towards the muscular man, causing the atmosphere to tremble violently. Just like the muscular man from before, Kinuhita's fists smashed towards the muscular man. Unable to catch his breath in time, the muscular man could only endure the intense pain in his body. His face alternated between green and black as he raised his other fist, which was shrouded in black gas, and met Kinuhita's terrifying attack head-on. Bam! This time, there wasn't the crisp sound of metal clashing, nor were there any sparks. There was only a muffled sound that resonated in everyone's heart. A violent shockwave spread out between Astrea, Kinuhita and the robust man. Astrea, Kinuhita and the muscular man retreated back to their respective directions. However, Astrea relied on her excellent mobility and wings to stabilize her body. Kinuhita also threw 2 punches in the opposite direction of her. She managed to stabilize her body by creating a shockwave. The robust man, on the other hand, was in a sorry state. Under the influence of the poison and after exchanging blows with Astrea and Kinuhita, the robust man's vision started to distort and he started to feel dizzy. It was obvious that the poison in the robust man's body was getting worse and worse. The robust man staggered and crashed into a tree. With a loud bang, the tree collapsed and the robust man's face turned pale. Of course, it wasn't Astrea or Kinuhita's credit. It was all due to the poison. If this continues, even if the robust man doesn't die from the poison, he will be killed by Astrea and Kinuhita due to the poison's influence. Chapter 19:16. The muscular man was furious. Although he was only a half-baked demigod, he still had 1 foot in the door of the demigod rank. Although he couldn't be considered a real demigod rank, he had surpassed the 9th stage and was in the middle position. Therefore, even if he wasn't a true demigod, as long as his opponent was still a Tier 9 fighter, it wouldn't be hard for him to deal with them. And this was under the condition that his opponent was a peak Tier 9 fighter. On the other hand, if his opponents were just a bunch of Tier 9 or Tier 9 beginner Tier 9 fellows with the strength of a half-step demigod, he could easily finish them off in a matter of minutes. However, now, the strong man had been poisoned and was severely affected. Under such an effect, he had no choice but to deal with a group of opponents who he thought could be defeated in a matter of minutes. Moreover, he had been reduced to such a sorry state by the opponents. How could the strong man not be mad with hatred? In addition, the strong man was not the type of person who was good at enduring, and with the influence of the false god's power on his mind, the strong man's hatred grew even stronger. I want you all dead. Driven by this hatred, the robust man almost recklessly ignored the condition of his body. He didn't even have the thought of retreating. Enduring the pain in his body and the dizziness in his head, he fiercely shook his body. His figure disappeared from the spot. The moment the muscular man disappeared, the illusory frame in Astrea's crimson eyes turned slightly. She flapped her wings and retreated swiftly. TSK. Just as Astrea retreated, a palm shrouded in black mist slammed down on her. Black mist billowed everywhere the palm passed, and a fishy stench filled the air. The attack missed. Only then did the muscular man's figure appear beside Astrea. His gaze was gloomy and his expression was ugly. He didn't make a sound. Swoosh! A black shadow flashed out like a lightning bolt. In a flash, the shadow lashed out at Astrea's waist. It was the muscular man's leg. The muscular man lashed out with his leg like a whip, leaving a trail of afterimages behind him as he aimed for Astrea's waist. Swoosh! But before the muscular man's leg could land on Astrea's waist, an ear-piercing sound came from the other side of her body. Something flew towards the muscular man's leg. Bam! With a muffled thud, a petite fist caught up with the man's leg before it could land on Astrea's waist. The fist landed on the man's leg with all its might. As a result, the robust man's leg was repelled, and the owner of the petite fist was also pushed back. It was Kinuha Tesai, without a doubt. Damn it! A sharp light flashed in the sturdy man's eyes. He faced upwards and issued a loud and clear roar. Roar! As the roar spread, the demonic beasts that surrounded them seemed to have received an order and rushed over. Bees easy. However, before the magical beasts could charge over, an invisible wave spread out like ripples. In the blink of an eye, it came into contact with the charging magical beasts. Soon after, the magical beasts that had been charging with great momentum became chaotic. Their bodies swayed as their eyes became somewhat lifeless. Seeing this, the strong man's furious eyes immediately turned towards the center of the ripple. There, Shokuho Misaki's eyes flashed with a strange light as she stared at the flying demonic beasts. Human woman, what did you do? Shokuho Misaki didn't care about the man's question. Or rather, Shokuho Misaki was sweating profusely. She didn't have the energy to care about the muscular man. There were at least 1,000,000 demonic beasts here. And this didn't include the demonic beasts that could only roar on the ground. They couldn't even fight in the air. With such a large number of demonic beasts, and all of them were at the 8th rank, Shokuho Misaki was barely able to control them. Otherwise, she would have ordered all the flying demonic beasts to attack their king. Not to mention, there were 10 9th-ranked demonic beasts among them. Shokuho Misaki couldn't control it. She could only influence it. Fortunately, among the 10 9th-ranked demonic beasts, only 3 of them had the ability to fly. Although she couldn't control them, Shokuho Misaki was still able to influence their mental state. Fortunately, demonic beasts that haven't reached the demigod rank have lower intelligence than humans. Otherwise, Shokuho Misaki wouldn't be able to control millions of 8th-ranked demonic beasts. Of course, this was all thanks to Takitsubu Riku's ability. Thus, the demonic beasts that were under the combined efforts of Shokuho Misaki and Takitsubu Riku started to sway in the air as if they were drunk. For a moment, they couldn't obey the muscular man's command. This made the strong man's face, which was extremely ugly because of the poison, become even more gloomy and angry. Now is not the time to be distracted. While the strong man was fuming with rage, a giggle suddenly sounded from behind him. Then, a fist that contained a majestic chi landed solidly on the strong man's back. Bam! Pucci, after suffering such a heavy blow, in addition to the effects of the poison, a mouthful of blood that had been suppressed for a long time finally spurted out from the robust man's mouth. Towards this, Kinuha Tesai was unfazed. She raised her other fist and unrestrainedly threw another terrifying punch at the muscular man's back. Bastard! The robust man's eyes were already bloodshot. He abruptly turned his head to look at Kinuha Tesai. Behind him, a thick black gas suddenly surged up like steam, turning into a huge spear that was dozens of meters long. It violently pierced towards Kinuha Tesai, who was punching towards him. Kinuha Tesai's expression didn't change. She maintained her posture and ignored the black spear that pierced through space. It was as if she was willing to risk her life to land a punch on the muscular man. But in fact, she was just being supported by another person. With a tearing sound, A laser lightsaber slashed down from above, directly cutting the huge black spear in half. Just as the sound of something tearing apart ended, Kinuha Tesai had already arrived in front of the muscular man. Her fist, which was imbued with boundless energy, landed on the muscular man's eyes without any hesitation. Bam! Ah! At the same time, a smear of blood and a blood-curdling scream sounded from the sky. The muscular man, with blood flowing out of his eye, fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. Bam! Immediately, smoke and dust rose in all directions. The ground seemed to tremble at this moment, as if there was an earthquake. Cracks as thick as an arm extended from the burly man's bear-like body, smashing a huge, deep hole in the ground. In the deep pit, the muscular man's body was in pain, his head was dizzy, and one of his eyes had been completely blasted off. He was constantly screaming in pain. Fresh blood flowed out from his broken eye socket, as if it was free of charge. At the same time, the resentment in the muscular man's heart was successfully ignited. "I will tear you into pieces." The muscular man roared at the sky like a madman. His voice was filled with unparalleled killing intent and anger. Without a doubt, this was the most miserable day the muscular man had ever lived. It was also the most furious day he had ever been. As the roar fell, the robust man's body seemed to erupt like a volcano. Dense black gas boiled and condensed, and black bubbles appeared one after another. In just a moment, the black gas turned into a huge pitch-black sphere. The sphere contained a terrifying power that caused the surrounding space to fluctuate. Bam! In the next moment, the sphere suddenly exploded, and a pitch-black light beam streaked across the sky like a stream of light soaring into the sky. Astria and Kinuhitasai felt the terrifying power of the pitch-black pillar of light. Their faces turned grave. The fake Beast King had gone completely mad. It didn't care about its body that was being tormented by the poison and attacked with all its might. No matter who it was that was hit by an attack of this level, they would definitely be dead without a doubt. Chapter 1917. Astria and Kinuhitasai knew how dangerous the black beam of light was, and they quickly dodged it. Astria and Kinuhitasai were both highly mobile and agile. Even though the black beam of light possessed terrifying destructive power, due to the poison in the man's eye and the poison in his eyes, he couldn't control it accurately. The black beam of light pierced through space and disappeared into the night sky. Kinuhita, Astria-chan, Frenda was the only one who had time to spare. She was prepared to support either Astria or Shokuho Misaki. She couldn't stand by and watch any longer. She yelled out in a sweet voice, "I will help you guys trap him." "Okay." Astria and Kinuhitasai nodded. It couldn't be helped. The fake Beast King was really hard to deal with. Even if it was poisoned, it could still hold on for so long. It could even fight Astria and Kinuhitasai for so long. Astria and Kinuhitasai couldn't do anything to it. It was better to have another person to help. "Takitsubu, please." On the other side, Frenda shouted as she spread out her hands. In the next instant, Takitsubu Riku's expected support interference landed on Frenda's body, granting her a new ability. That ability was the ability that shocked Tokuwadai's princess, Electromancer. However, Frenda didn't intend to use it to shock the man. She wanted to use it to control the iron sand. Beep, beep, beep. In an instant, streaks of bluish-white lightning flashed around Frenda's body. At the same time, a thick wave of pitch-black iron sand also surged out from the ground and into the sky as if it was being pulled by something. Then, under Frenda's control, the waves of iron sand swirled and formed a huge black net. It whistled down and covered the muscular man who was still clutching his bleeding eye on the ground. It's not over yet. When the iron sand net came into contact with the man's body, before the man could react, dense electric arcs appeared on the net. Waves of electric current crackled and flashed, passing through the sturdy man's body and producing a series of sizzling noises. The sudden pain caused the man to struggle madly. But no matter how hard he struggled, he was unable to break free from the net. The huge iron sand net could not be shaken off. It was like maggots in a tarsal bone, firmly sticking to his body and trapping him. Watch out! Kinuhatasai swooped down from the sky like a small cannonball. Chaotic airflow surged around her body as she landed heavily on the muscular man, who was much larger than her. Boom! The terrifying impact on the sturdy man's body caused the ground beneath him to collapse with a loud bang. The sturdy man also let out a painful howl and a furious roar. The black aura around his body transformed into a pitch-black whip shadow. With a ferocious swing, he lashed out at Kinuhatasai, who was on top of him. Seeing this, in the sky, Frenda waved her hand, and a thick bolt of lightning shot down like a bolt of lightning. With a chi sound, it landed on the black whip that was lashing out at Kinuhatasai, causing the black gas on the whip to be electrified. As he stood up stiffly, a series of sizzling sound could be heard. Huh! Kinuhatasai stood on top of the man and raised her fist that was surrounded by chaotic air currents. Without any hesitation, the punch landed solidly on the muscular man's head. Bang! Kinuhatasai was already known for her close combat ability. With the LVL-5 Asphyxia armor and a level of 80, even if she didn't have any combat chi or mana, Kinuhatasai's attack and defense were much scarier than a monster. Now, with such a punch, even the strong man with the strength of a pseudo-demigod let out a shriek of agony. The ground behind him had already collapsed and sunk deeply. On the other hand, Kinuhatasai, who had punched the muscular man into the rock plate, quickly retreated. Now, Astria-chan. Buzz! In the sky, an aurora shot out from Astria's body and rushed into the night sky, scattering the thick clouds. The aurora in the middle of the night was naturally glaring to the extreme. Be it the group of girls or the magical beast present, they couldn't help but close their eyes. The surrounding space also started to vibrate along with the aurora. Within the aurora, Astria's figure turned into a flash of light. She released a blinding light that illuminated the dark forest, mountain range, and even the sky. After an unknown amount of time, the light pillar that shot into the sky slowly seeped into Astria's body. The surrounding light also seeped into Astria's body. When all the light disappeared, Astria looked like a completely different person. Golden specks of light floated around her like a golden rainbow hanging high in the sky. She wore a blue princess-like dress that fluttered in the wind. Her abdomen was exposed, and there was a set of white armor on both sides of her body. The gauntlet was pulled down from her neck to her arms. Her shoulders were exposed to the air and shone with a white luster. The pure white wings on Astria's back split into 3 pairs. Her ankle-length blonde hair was tied into 2 bundles on the right side of her head. The ends of her hair fluttered in the wind as her dress fluttered in the wind. It was an eye-catching sight. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was the weapon in Astria's hand. It was a giant sword that was about 20 meters long. It was as long as a skyscraper, and its surface was shrouded in a purple glow. Pandora mode. On top of that, it was Astria's second evolution, Pandora mode. In this mode, Astria would remove all defenses, and her attack power would be incomparably terrifying. The muscular man seemed to have noticed this as well. The muscular man was horrified to find out that as Astria evolved and the great sword appeared, a deadly aura of death slowly seeped out from the bottom of his heart like a tidal wave. It enveloped him, and he could feel it. The next moment, he will die. How is this possible? 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 How can I die in the hands of a woman who isn't even a demigod? Even though such thoughts were spinning wildly in his mind, the shadow of death still shrouded the robust man. At this moment, the robust man could not help but feel fear. But it was too late for him to feel fear. The moment the muscular man was poisoned by Shokuho Misaki and didn't choose to run away, he was destined to end up like this. Astria, who had transformed into a goddess, raised her lightsaber and pulled it behind her back. She swung her lightsaber without hesitation at the horrified man who was trapped in the iron sand net. Astrea swung her lightsaber down without hesitation. Clang! A clear whistling sound reverberated between heaven and earth. It was the sound of a sword ray tearing through the air. In reality, a sword light had indeed descended from the sky. It was in the shape of a crescent moon. It descended from the sky and slashed down viciously. It tore through the air and split the heavens and earth. Astrea's unstoppable greatsword slashed through the space below. It tore through the atmosphere and sliced open space, leaving a trail of sword energy behind it. When the crescent-shaped sword light fell and gradually disappeared from this space, all the air between heaven and earth seemed to have frozen. Embedded in the rock plate, the strong man who was bound by the iron sand net had stopped struggling. He lay there motionless, like a statue, and no longer made any movements. No, he didn't stop moving. The muscular man's body was moving at an extremely slow speed. If one were to observe carefully, they would discover that this extremely slow movement was actually the robust man's body, with the space between his eyebrows as the boundary. The left and right sides of his body were simultaneously parting in two directions. Poochie! Fresh blood splattered into the sky. Chapter 1918. Splat! An extremely crisp, tearing sound rang out, and a burst of dense crimson blood sprayed into the sky like a fountain. The muscular man's body was torn apart symmetrically in two different directions. Along with it, the thick and heavy earth parted. Rumble! Amidst the loud noise, the ground that was swept by the sword light was neatly cut into two halves along with the strong man. It was as if the ground was being split apart during an earthquake. Amidst the tremors, accompanied by the earth-shattering aura and the explosion of crushed stones, the ground became two completely unconnected plains. If one were to look at the mountain range from afar, they would be able to see it clearly. The mountain range was split into two. The muscular man was also split into two. At this point, the demigod Beast King who led an army of magical beasts to attack the Ailu Empire, who brought unparalleled despair to the people of the Ailu Empire, died. Rumble! The earth was still split into two due to the previous attack. Roar! Roar! Whoa! The group of magical beasts erupted into waves of terrified roars. Some are like birds that were startled by the twang of a bow, fleeing for their lives with their tails between their legs. Some were unable to dodge in time and were swallowed by the huge crack that split open from the ground, falling into an endless abyss. The flying demonic beasts were panicking. The demonic beasts on the ground were running for their lives. The mountain range was cracking, and the world was shaking. For a moment, rocks were flying everywhere, and the ground was trembling. Huge magical beasts were roaring in panic as they ran around in all directions. It was a scene straight out of hell. Perhaps the demonic beasts sensed the death of their leader, but the demonic beasts that were under Shokuha Misaki and Takitsubu Riku's control no longer charged at them. At least, none of the demonic beasts were too far away. As for the magical beasts that were closer, they were still roaring. They charged toward the girls. Even without their leader, the demonic beasts were no longer in charge. The demonic beasts had lost their ability to form an army and not attack each other. However, the demonic beasts saw humans as food. Naturally, the demonic beasts that were closer to them all charged towards the girls. Among them, the 3 rank 9 demonic beasts were among them. At the level of the 9th rank, the intelligence of magical beasts was not weak. They still had the ability to distinguish who was the enemy. The 3 demonic beasts that suffered a loss at the hands of the girls weren't going to let them go so easily. But without the presence of a pseudo-beast king, which demonic beast here can match up to Astrea, who is close to the peak of Tier 9 after her 2nd evolution. Astrea raised the 20-meter-long greatsword in her hand again. She swung the greatsword as if it was weightless. The greatsword drew a crescent-shaped arc in the air and slashed forward like an aurora. In an instant, a series of giant swords danced in the air. Streaks of sword light sliced through the bodies of the flying magical beast army led by the three ninth-grade magical beasts. In an instant, dark red blood blossomed in the air, and the severed limbs of the magical beasts kept falling to the ground. Among them were the three rank 9 demonic beasts. Astria's attack killed the 3 demonic beasts that were higher in rank than her in the blink of an eye. This was the true power of Astria after her second evolution. She had abandoned all her defenses. It was terrifying. However, without the leader of the demonic beasts were nothing more than a bunch of ferocious beasts. They didn't retreat after smelling the scent of blood. Instead, they became even more frenzied. Even the demonic beasts in the distance were attracted to them. Astria-chan, don't get caught up in the fight. Shokahome Misaki, who saw the situation clearly, quickly called out. There's no need to waste time on these headless flies. Let's charge out. Without the humans around, these demonic beasts will disperse. As long as all the girls left, there would be no beast king to restrain them. Without a common enemy, the magical beasts would return to the state they were in when they were in the giant beast forest. They would no longer form an army. Instead, it was very likely that they would kill each other because of natural enemies, food, and other issues. That's why as long as the girls leave, the demonic beasts attacking Ailu Empire will no longer be a threat. Got it. Astria nimbly retrieved the greatsword that was 10 times bigger than her. She pointed it in a direction and dashed out like an arrow. The sound of tearing continued, but it wasn't the same as before. This time, the demonic beasts that blocked Astria's path were skewered into meat skewers by the giant swords. Kinuhida, Frenda. Shokohome Misaki carried Takitsubu Riku, who had been buffing the girls, and followed behind Astria. Follow them. Hearing this, Kinuhata Asai sent a Class 8 demonic beast flying with a punch. Frenda also used an electric shock to turn the demonic beast into charcoal. Then, she turned around and followed up. Roar! Roar! Up! Without their leader, the demonic beasts went berserk and charged at the girls. But to the girls, these demonic beasts were no longer a threat. If there's a word to describe the current situation, it would be chaos. They weren't able to form an encirclement, nor were they able to have a clear target like before. Now, the magical beasts couldn't be described as an army. They were just a large group of wild beasts that were rioting. They weren't a threat at all. In fact, some of the magical beasts that panicked and didn't know where to go had even collided with each other and started fighting furiously. Chaos! 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 Everything was in chaos. Roar! 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 Under the girls' assault, blood splattered everywhere. The demonic beasts were like sharks that smelled blood as they charged at the girls with bloodshot eyes. Blade rays flashed in midair, and every time a demonic beast flashed, it would fall into an eternal slumber and become one of the dismembered corpses on the ground. However, the magical beasts that were not restrained were crazy. They did not consider the consequences at all. They only cared about rushing towards the food in their eyes. They were densely packed like a swarm of locusts. Coupled with those chaotic noises, it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Astria's greatsword was drenched in blood, and its speed started to slow down as the demonic beasts charged at her without regard for their lives. Roar! 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 The annoying chaotic roars continued. At this moment, the line of girls' vision was completely filled with magical beasts, causing them to feel a chill in their hearts. Ugh! Astria started to pant. No! Shokohome Misaki bit her lips as she looked at the demonic beasts in front of her. If this goes on, even if the magical beasts don't form an encirclement, we will be blocked by the rioting magical beasts in this beast tide. What should we do now? Kinuhata Sai repeatedly swung her fists, sending the approaching demonic beasts flying away with a series of bangs. There are too many of them. In the end, it's time for me to step up. Frenda jumped up and landed in front of Astria. She took out a few dolls that didn't look like much. Watch me blow you all up. Perhaps Takitsubu Riku guessed Frenda's intention. She interfered with Frenda's personal reality and granted Frenda the ability to teleport. In the next instant, In the tide of flying magical beasts that filled the girl's vision, dolls that didn't look good suddenly appeared and swelled up. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after, intense flames and explosions burst out from the beast tide in front of them. Magic beasts with smoke or fire all over their bodies fell from the flames. At the same time, a path opened up in the middle of the demonic beast horde. Shokuhon Misaki, Kinuhada, Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria were overjoyed. They didn't think twice before rushing towards the tunnel that was opened up by the explosion. Chapter 1919. While Shokuhon Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria were working together to slay the Beast King, Sylph and Fei were waiting on a small hill not far from the forest. Sylph raised her hand as she looked at the group of nocturnal magical beasts rushing down the mountain in an orderly manner. Some of them were excited, some of them were mad, some of them were bloodthirsty, and some of them were ferociously roaring. Her beautiful face was filled with frost. Fei felt that Sylph's actions were a little unethical, but she could understand. The magical beast's sense of smell and senses were extremely sharp. Nocturnal magical beasts that could move freely at night had a much sharper sense of smell than those magical beasts that were active during the day. If Sylph were to use her mana in such a manner, she might be discovered by the demonic beasts. Fei wasn't confident she could escape from the group of demonic beasts charging towards the 2-tier 8 girls. That's why Sylph secretly mobilized her mana. It was dangerous and reckless. However, looking at the group of magical beasts rushing down the mountain, Fei almost activated her Do-Chi. It couldn't be helped. The demonic beasts that Sylph and Fei saw weren't going to put on a show. They were going to attack the last remaining human territories of the Ailu Empire. This was the only human territory left in the Ailu Empire. It wasn't just the Ailu Empire's imperial city. Sylph and Fei's family were also there. Now, these roaring demonic beasts are going to attack the Ailu Empire's capital and threaten Sylph and Fei's families. No one could remain calm at the thought of this. If it wasn't for the fact that Shokuhon Misaki, Kinuhada Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu, Riku, and Astria were in a situation that was 1,000 times more dangerous than hers, Sylph would have rushed out and caused a ruckus if she wasn't worried about saving the Empire. Even so, Sylph did not hold back. He had been secretly mobilizing his magic power. He looked like he could rush out at any time, which was really a headache. As for Fei, she was more worried about Shokuhon Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu, Riku, and Astria. I wonder how Shokuhu and the others are doing. Fei couldn't help but whisper. At the same time, there was a worried look in his eyes. Leaving such a dangerous task to them, was it really no problem? Strictly speaking, Shokuhon Misaki, Kinuhada, Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu, Riku, and Astria weren't from the Ailu Empire. It was just that Wu Yin had a good relationship with the royal family and the Lori family. That was why he was closer to Sylph and Fei. It was just as Shokuhon Misaki said. Whether it was the Ailu Empire or the Spalier world, they wouldn't feel the slightest bit of heartache even if the humans were to be wiped out. The only reason they were willing to risk their lives to help was because they had a good relationship with Wu Yin. That's why Fei felt guilty when she thought about how the survival of the Ailu Empire was in the hands of 5 girls who had nothing to do with her. Sylph seemed to have the same thought when she heard Fei's words. The icy blue magic power in her hand slowly stopped. She pondered for a moment before speaking. If it's them, they should be fine, but the opponent is a beast king that's close to becoming a demigod. Fei's worry didn't lessen. There's also a large number of Tier 9 demonic beasts. Even if Shokuhu and the others are all Tier 9 demonic beasts like His Majesty said, it's still very dangerous. Generally speaking, that's true, Sylph said expressionlessly. But if it's them, they should be fine. Fine? Fei hesitated for a moment and asked. Sylph's tone was firm and confident. Why are you so sure, Princess? Sylph didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze softened. Because they are that man's most trusted subordinates. When Fei Fei heard Sylph's words, the image of that man appeared in her mind. The man's carefree, willful, and confident smile on his face calmed her down a little. That's true. Fei Fei chuckled. Since they're the women of that man who's good at creating miracles, there shouldn't be any problems. What we need to do is to trust them. Sylph nodded. Then, all we have to do is to wait for news of their success. Fei Fei nodded. Both of them calmed down a lot after listening to Sylph's short conversation. They turned to look at the demonic beasts that were still rushing down the hill. Their emotions calmed down. Rumble. At this moment, the ground suddenly trembled like a volcano that was about to erupt, and there was a loud noise that sounded like the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. The sudden change startled Sylph and Fei Fei. However, compared to Sylph and Fei Fei, the demonic beasts that were rushing down the hill reacted even more violently. Roar! 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 The magical beast army, which had been marching down the mountain in an orderly manner, suddenly let out roars that were filled with grief, fear, anger, and panic. The entire army was thrown into chaos, and they started running in all directions like a group of prisoners who had been under guard but had now been freed. No, instead of saying that they were running, it would be more accurate to say that they were running around like headless flies. Some even started biting each other, as if they were fighting. Sylph and Fei Fei were taken aback by the sudden change. But shortly after, their thoughts were interrupted by the violent tremors under their feet. They leaped backward and retreated swiftly. What presented themselves before the two young ladies was an extremely chaotic scene. The ground shook violently. Gravel flew everywhere. The demonic beasts tore at each other. Chaotic roars echoed in the air. Chaos. Total chaos. What's wrong? Fei Fei looked at the chaotic scene in astonishment. What happened? What happened? Sylph, on the other hand, calmed herself down and her icy blue eyes glowed. Could it be that they succeeded? Fei Fei seemed to have thought of the same thing, and her pretty face became rosy, which was caused by excitement. As everyone knew, the reason why the demonic beasts abandoned their habits of living together and didn't invade each other's territory and even formed armies to attack the humans collectively was because of the Beast King's orders. If the one who gave the orders was gone, the demonic beasts wouldn't get along with each other. If the fake Beast King who gave the orders to the magical beasts was already dead, then the chaos in front of them could be explained. Roar! 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 All of a sudden, the demonic beast's roars in the sky and in the surroundings became even more chaotic, attracting Sylph and Fei Fei's attention. Then, Sylph and Fei Fei saw it at the same time. On the ground, countless magical beasts were running out of the mountains, as if they were chasing something or fleeing for their lives. They were in a panic and did not know where to go. It was the same scene in the sky. Flying magical beasts flew around randomly, without considering the direction at all. They were like birds that were being aimed at by a shotgun, roaring in horror as they ran around randomly. A few figures flew out from these flying magical beasts, followed by a large group of flying magical beasts of even greater number and variety. It was as if they were being chased, and they were flying at high speed. Sylph and Fei Fei shouted at the same time when they saw the group of figures flying out. Over here, Shokuha Misaki, Kinuhita Sai, Takitsubariku, Frenda, and Astria also saw Sylph and Fei Fei. Apart from Astria, who acted as the vanguard, and Shokuha Misaki, who carried Takitsubariku, Kinuhita Sai, and Frenda swooped down and carried Sylph and Fei Fei in their arms. Let's go. In an instant, the group of 7 young ladies shuttled through a large expanse of chaotic magical beasts and flashed explosively towards the horizon. Chapter 1920. Roar! 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 Along with the roar that anyone would be sick of hearing, the flying magical beasts in the mountain range that had been split into 2 flew into the sky like frightened birds, scattering in all directions. Not only the flying beasts, but even the ground beasts that couldn't fly seemed to have lost their target. They scattered in fear and trepidation, no longer heading towards the center of the city. On the city walls, The city guards who were preparing to engage in another battle with the nocturnal magical beasts looked at the scene of the magical beasts fleeing in all directions. Their faces were filled with bewilderment, and the sounds of whispers began to spread on the city walls. Not long after, even Carter and the others who were in the palace were alerted. They all went to the top of the palace and looked at the mountain range in the distance. When Carter and the others saw the mountain range that looked like it was cut in half, they looked at each other in confusion. "What the hell is going on?" Borel asked. His face was still a little pale. "It seems like he hasn't recovered from the injuries inflicted by Kinuhidasai. Why is the mountain range broken?" "Yes, that's right." Yak also cried out in surprise. "It was fine just a moment ago." "That's not the point." Lei Wang frowned. "The point is, the beasts are also in a strange state." Kite nodded and looked at the densely packed beasts fleeing like ants outside Royal City. The flying beasts in the sky also flew in all directions. No one knew where they were going. He mumbled as if he was in a dream. "The beasts' army scattered?" Behind Carter, the head of the Ailu Empire's #1 family, the head of the Lori family, the head of the second family, the head of the Saito family, Sato, and the head of the third family, the head of the Ladine family, Harlow, were also looking at each other in confusion. Only Bing Ling and Baishi noticed that something was amiss. "Where are Shokuho Misaki and the others?" The ice spirit scanned her surroundings. "There's such a huge change in the situation. There's no way they don't know, right?" "No, not just Shokuho Misaki and the others." Bishi narrowed his eyes. "Princess Sylph and Miss Fei Fei are also missing." Carter and the others only reacted after hearing Bing Ling and Baishi's words. They all began to search. However, before they could search for long, several figures that had turned into flowing lights flew over at an extremely fast speed. It was imprinted in the eyes of Carter's group. "They are Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhida, Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, Astria, Sylph, and Fei Fei who rushed back from the mountain range." The Thunder Emperor was slightly taken aback. Why did they come back from outside? The outside here naturally referred to the outside of Monarch City's boundary. Just now, the Thunder Sovereign had seen with his own eyes that an extremely small opening had opened up in the Royal City's barrier. The group of girls had entered through that opening. The Royal City's barrier was personally set up by the Ailu Empire's royal family members. It was the strongest barrier in the Empire. Just how sturdy this barrier was could be seen from the fact that the magical beast army had been attacking the Royal City for several days without stopping, and that it had taken hundreds of level 8 magical beasts to attack at the same time to break through. Only the Ailu Empire's royal family knew how to control the barrier. Outsiders had no way of knowing, not even the 3 great families. However, Sylph was the most respected princess of the Ailu Empire's royal family. Naturally, she knew how to control the barrier. That was why Shokuho Misaki and the girls brought Sylph along. Fei Fei also made use of the opportunity to tag along. Carter and the others didn't have much time to ponder over the matter. The group of girls landed at the top of the royal city and stopped in front of Carter and the others. Thud! They landed on the ground. Takitsubu Riku, who was in Shokuho Misaki's embrace, fell to her knees. The pair of eyes that had been trembling all this time had already returned to normal. However, it seemed as if it had done some extremely intense exercise as it began to pant heavily. Takitsubu, Sister Riku, Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata, Sai, Frenda, and Astria cried out at the same time. They quickly went to support Takitsubu Riku. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Takitsubu Riku didn't bother to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm just a little tired." At first glance, Takitsubu Riku didn't seem to have made a single move in this expedition to the mountain range where the demonic beasts resided. However, if one were to point out who contributed the most in slaying the demonic beast king, it would be none other than Takitsubu Riku. From the fact that the girls needed to shield their 5 senses to hide their whereabouts, to avoid the detection of demons and strong men, to having Frenda control the water vapor and poison the strong men's water. Whether it was the ability to shield their 5 senses or the ability to control the water vapor, It was all given to them by Takitsubu Riku. Not only that, Takitsubu Riku also granted Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, and Frienda the ability to fly during the battle with a muscular man. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Kinuhata Sai's flying ability throughout the battle. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Shokuho Misaki's ability to control the demonic beasts. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Frienda's ability to trap the muscular man and kill him with a single blow from Astria. Takitsubu Riku also granted Frienda the ability to trap the muscular man. On top of that, Takitsubu Riku also strengthened Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, and Frienda's abilities. She also maintained the ability of the three girls to fly. Isn't Takitsubu Riku's contribution a lot? If it wasn't for Takitsubu Riku, the mission to assassinate the demonic Beast King wouldn't have succeeded. That's why Takitsubu Riku's contribution is at least 70%. Of course, Takitsubu Riku also used up all of her computing power. It's only natural that she's exhausted. Thank you for your hard work, Takitsubu. Shokuho Misaki gently patted Takitsubu Riku's back. Rest well now. Takitsubu Riku forced a smile and nodded. Kai wanted to step forward, but was stopped by Sylph. Let me explain the details. Sylph shook her head and spoke in a gentle tone. Our heroes are already very tired tonight. Let them have a good rest, heroes. Everyone was stunned by her explanation. Kite was the only one who made the connection between the girls and the magical beasts outside and Sylph's words. He had a vague idea of what was going on. Leaving aside Kate, Kinuhata, Sai, Frienda, and Astria helped Takitsubu Riku into the palace to rest. Shokuho Misaki followed behind Kinuhata Sai, Frienda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria. She suddenly stopped and looked at the sky. Her eyes sparkled as she revealed an elegant smile. We aren't vases. We don't have to wait for you to come back to deal with these half-baked people. Did you see that? After saying this, Shokuho Misaki turned around, smiled, and walked into the palace. Outside the palace, the demonic beasts are still rioting. They're scattering in all directions. As for where the demonic beasts are going, that's no longer a concern. At the very least, not now. However, no one noticed that a strange black light suddenly shot out from the mountain range that was split in half, shooting toward the horizon. However, before the strange black light could travel far, a pitch-black spatial crack that was filled with ferocious eyeballs suddenly appeared in its path. A flawless white hand reached out from within and grabbed the black light, pulling it into the crack. Then, the pitch-black spatial crack filled with ferocious eyeballs slowly closed, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Capital of a different era, Hall of the Heart of a different era. Yuran smiled as she looked at the strange black light that was constantly struggling in her hands. It wanted to escape, but was unable to do so. It wanted to burrow into her skin, but was obstructed by a layer of invisible force. In order to capture you, I almost made the cage disappear because I used too much demonic energy. You should feel honored. Chapter 1921. 7 hours after the girls parted ways at the supply town and headed to their respective destinations. In the boundless sky, a huge airship that couldn't be seen by the naked, I was flying forward at an extremely terrifying speed with a sharp sound of breaking the air. This airship was none other than Fraxinus, which had departed from the supply town and was heading towards the capital of the Baruba Empire. The Behemoth Forest is located in the middle of the three empires. Leaving from the supply town closest to the Behemoth Forest is the fastest way to enter any of the three empires. Even so, Fraxinus still hasn't reached the capital of the Baruba Empire even after 7 hours of flying. What's displayed on the screen in the command center is a desert. Yes, a desert. In the Spalier world, Ailu Empire and Fea Empire don't have deserts. Only the Baruba Empire has deserts. More than 80% of its land is deserts. As a result, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Yoshino, and Origami only saw a desert the moment they entered the Baruba Empire. Of course, along the way, they also came across many cities in the desert. But those cities are empty. Only a group of magical beasts are left. Over time, Miku started to feel tired. Meijio, who was already experiencing visual fatigue, couldn't help but rub her eyes as she muttered, "Still not there? Still not there?" 10 fragrances gradually lost her patience. The bow that tied her purple hair into a ponytail seemed to shake with the impatience in her heart. "I'm hungry." "Hungry?" On the side, Kurumi's expression became somewhat helpless. "Toka-san, you just ate 3 puddings, right? Is food the only thing left in your head?" Origami also said expressionlessly, "I'd rather raise a sow than raise you." "Who are you calling a sow?" Kite Origami. 10 fragrances, who had a grudge with Origami for a long time, retorted loudly, "I'm a human." "A human?" A fourth bunny holding a rabbit plushie in his hand blinked his big watery eyes and said in a daze, "Aren't you an elf?" "Looks like Toka is getting used to being a human," the rabbit plushie Yoshino said in a sharp and sneaky voice. She giggled as she danced with joy. "Do you want to try out a human's lifestyle? Do you want to do something perverted?" "Miss Toka, do you want to do something perverted?" Miku's eyes lit up. With a bright smile that was obviously not suitable for this moment, she slightly moved towards 10 fragrances. "Actually, I'm very interested in that." Allah. Kurumi covered her mouth. Only her beautiful eyes were exposed as she smiled. Her every move had an indescribable charm to it. "What a coincidence. I'm also very interested in it, especially when I'm researching it with my husband." "With my dear?" The bright smile on Meijio's face immediately disappeared. She pouted her lips like a child. "That's great. I also want to study perverted things with my dear. Ugh." Yoshino's face turned red. She lowered her head like an ostrich. Her head almost reached her chest. Origami, on the other hand, only came to this world. His expression changed for the first time. "This is discrimination," Origami said in a rash tone. "We're all summons. It's not fair to only study philosophy with you." Ah. Toka, who was about to blush, was stunned by Origami's words. "Philosophical knowledge? Perverted things? For an elf whose brain doesn't exist in her head, I don't have to answer. I don't think I need to answer." Origami glanced at Toka. "You'd better find a pigsty to hide in and wait for us to feed you, you so." "What? What did you say?" Toka widened her beautiful big eyes and stared at Toichi Origami fiercely. Toichi Origami didn't want to be outdone and met Toka's fierce gaze with a calm, yet strange gaze. There seemed to be an electric current colliding fiercely in their eyes. The timid Yoshino grabbed Kurumi's clothes with tears in her eyes. Her body timidly hid behind Kwang-san's back. Kwang-san and Meijio's expression became helpless. This scene, in fact, in the 7 hours since they set off, it happened 3 or 4 times every hour. Due to her parents being saved, Origami didn't hate the elves anymore. She still treated the elves coldly, but that's only because of her personality. No matter who she is facing, even if it's Wu Yin, she's always like this. She can't be blamed for this. However, perhaps it was due to their incompatibility, but even though Origami no longer resented elves, she still treated Toka the same as before. It was as if she still had a deep grudge against her. She would mock her at the slightest provocation and even spit out malicious words. She would mercilessly seize every opportunity to attack Toka. Similarly, Toka didn't have a good impression of Origami, who tried to kill her in the past. Ever since they were still in the dating battle world, she had been bickering with Origami every day. Now, even if Origami had no reason to hate the elves, Toka would still put on a stern face whenever she saw Origami. And so, this quarrelsome pair stayed. They never stopped quarreling. Now, it was just a daily quarrel. When this scene fell into the eyes of others, it had a different flavor. "Huh." Mika chuckled. "They have such a good relationship." "Yeah." Kurumi agreed. "It's like a replica of Misaki-san and Shoko-san." Indeed, Toka and Origami were like Mikoto and Shokuho Misaki. They would always go at each other's throats. If the way Mikoto and Shokuho Misaki interacted with each other was a sign of their unique bond, then Toka and Origami were probably the same, right? That's why this scene was completely different in other people's eyes. Only Yoshino looked at each other. They didn't seem to understand what was going on. Let's end the quarrel here. Kotori, who was sitting on the commander's seat with a lollipop in her mouth, suddenly said, "According to the map, we will arrive at the capital of the Baruba Empire in half an hour. If there's anything you need to prepare, you'd better hurry. Once we're there won't be any time for you to bond." "Who's getting to know each other?" Toka and Origami said at the same time. They looked at each other. One snorted and looked away. The other was still expressionless. Kotori opened her mouth. She wanted to say something, but the moment she opened her mouth, Misaka's sister, who was sitting on the left and right of the commander's seat, spoke up. "Reporting. There's a reaction of a living being within 1,200 meters ahead. There's a 98% chance that it's a human." "Do," Misaka 10469 reminded. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene on the big screen in the command room changed, and a scene was shown. On the screen, a figure suddenly appeared in the middle of an endless desert. "It's a person." "No, it's not just one person." Not long after, two other figures appeared on the screen. They were quite a distance away from the first figure, and they were flying across the desert at breakneck speed. Seeing this scene, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami frowned. Meijio said hesitantly, "The three of them are all humans?" It's normal for Miku to have this question. This was because the three figures in the picture did not seem to be moving together at all. Instead, it seemed like the figure in front was fleeing for his life, while the two figures behind him seemed to be chasing after the former. They had been following closely behind him the entire time. That's not right. Humans are currently in a war with demonic beasts. Why would there be humans chasing after them at this time? Something's not right. Kurumi said based on her intuition. Something we don't know about must have happened. Kotori nodded and waved her hand. "Prepare to land." Chapter 1922. In a desolate desert, a young lady of about 20 years of age was panting heavily as she gritted her teeth. She forcefully supported her body that seemed like it could collapse at any time as she flew forward with all her might. The ones that caused this young lady to suffer such a miserable fate were the two figures that were following closely behind her. They were two middle-aged men that were undoubtedly older than the young lady. They were at least in their 30s. Furthermore, one of them had a sinister scar on his face, while the other was an extremely ugly middle-aged man. Looking at the scarred man and the ugly man who were chasing closely behind her, the young lady repeatedly used the tip of her foot to push off the ground. She erupted with what little do-chi she had left, causing her body to abruptly shoot out a certain distance each time her foot touched the ground. However, the young girl's speed was much slower compared to before. This caused the young girl to bite her lips even harder. Even her complexion had turned pale. The young lady's name was Milena, and she was the direct disciple of the Mo clan, the #1 clan in the Baruba Empire. Her status was similar to Fei-Fei's. However, compared to Fei-Fei, although Milena was the direct disciple of the Mo clan, her treatment was not as good as Fei-Fei's. She was valued by her teacher, because the Baruba Empire was an empire where men were stronger than women. In the Baruba Empire, although not all men treated women as slaves, but when it came to status, women were looked down upon. Therefore, even the personal disciple of the Moma clan, the #1 family in the Baruba Empire, was not treated as well as Fei-Fei. Of course, even if her treatment was not as good as Fei-Fei's, Milena was not inferior to Fei-Fei in terms of talent or strength. Relying on her own efforts, Milena had successfully advanced to a Type 8 powerhouse not long ago. She had finally obtained the recognition of her teacher. He was sent by his teacher from the Mo family to a city managed by the Mo family to act as the manager of that city. And with Milena's strength of the 8th step and her excellent management skills, the city under her management was thriving day by day. It could not be said that it was developing vigorously, but it was still much better than before. It was quite well received by the people of the Mo family. However, all of this was destroyed when the demonic beasts attacked the Baruba Empire. But it was still all right. There weren't many casualties in the city under Milena's management. Under the orders of the Baruba Emperor, they began to gather their forces in the capital. The ordinary people, on the other hand, retreated to the sea and prepared to use the capital as a base to fight against the magical beasts. Originally, Melina had to go to the Baruba Empire as well. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The three Type 8 powerhouses who had once been Melina's subordinates and were under her control had betrayed her. Yes, betrayal. These people took the initiative to seek out the Beast King and surrender to him in order to save their own lives. There is no doubt that this was a very foolish move. The magical beasts saw humans as food and enemies. How could they accept the surrender of humans and let them live? However, they didn't know what was wrong with the Beast King that led the magical beasts to attack the Baruba Empire. It accepted their surrender and gave them an order. He ordered these three Type 8 powerhouses to gather in the city under Melina's management and kill all the powerhouses who were preparing to go to the capital to participate in the war. Melina hadn't expected this, and neither had the experts in the city that Melina was in charge of. Thus, without knowing anything, they still acted together with these three traitors. The result was obvious. First, they had fallen for the trap of the three Type 8 powerhouses, and the experts that Melina had gathered were all killed. The remaining Melina had risked her life to kill one of the Type 8 powerhouses before escaping with great difficulty. Naturally, this caused the other two Type 8 powerhouses to be enraged. They persevered and chased after her. From the looks of it, they wouldn't give up until they caught up. That was why the scene before them had occurred. If it wasn't for the fact that Melina had managed to find out from one of the Type 8 powerhouses about the fate of the Baruba Empire, Michigan Lena would definitely not have fled. She would have risked her life to kill these two traitors. The Scar Man and the Ugly Man knew that if this piece of information was leaked, the two of them would die a horrible death. Thus, they gave chase with all their might. As time passed, the Scarred Man and the Ugly Man, who had been unable to catch up for a long time, couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Damn it! The Scarred Man's eyes were fixed on the barely discernible figure that was fleeing in a sorry state not too far away. A gloomy look appeared in his eyes. Damned woman, don't let me catch you. Otherwise, I'll torture you to death. Heh. The Ugly Man's eyes revealed a perverted expression as he laughed coldly. I wonder how the direct disciple of the Mo Ma clan's patriarch would taste. Would she be like the other women and reveal an expression of despair and cry for help? In front, Melina seemed to have heard the conversation between the two. Her face became even paler. Clenching her teeth, she tried her best to circulate the do chi in her body in an attempt to escape the pursuit of the two. However, after an entire day of fleeing, in addition to the injuries she received while risking her life to kill one of the traitors, how could Melina's body endure such a huge burden? Not long after, the do chi flowing around Melina's body became much dimmer. Her entire body became soft, and she lost all her strength, falling into the desert. Seeing the scene of Melina falling down, the Scarred Man and the Ugly Man were overjoyed. Their figures suddenly sped up a lot, flashed over, and then surrounded Melina from the front and the back. Ha ha ha! The Scar Man laughed wildly. Run. Continue to run. I want to see where you can run to. Melina raised her head in an unyielding manner. She used her pale face to coldly stare at the Scarred Man in front of her. I really regret that the person I killed earlier was not you. The Scarred Man's wild laughter came to an abrupt halt. His face became dark and solemn. I want to see if you will still be so unyielding in a while. Saying this, the Scarred Man suddenly raised his hand. The do chi on his body surged out and agglomerated into an illusionary image of a ferocious beast behind him. Similar to the Scarred Man, the illusionary image of a ferocious beast raised its hand and emitted a clear beast roar. A palm violently slammed toward Melina's body. Immediately, the huge beast paw, which was comparable to a meter-tall rock, heavily smashed down towards Melina with an extremely fierce shockwave. Looking at the enormous beast palm that was violently slamming toward her, Melina's eyes flashed with unwillingness. However, she did not cower. Recalling the important information in her hands, she clenched her silver teeth and crazily mobilized the do-chi in her body that had been squeezed to the limit. She extended her hand and waved it. A scorpion-like beast shadow with a tail appeared behind her. In the next moment, the beast shadow swung its body. The tail behind it turned into a black shadow and rashly met the illusionary beast palm that was smashing toward her. Bang! When the two came into contact, a muffled sound resounded. The air wave that was generated from the impact lifted the heavy sand in the desert and filled the air like smoke and dust. At the center of the collision, the beast shadow behind Melina dissipated at a speed that was visible to the naked eye due to the lack of do-chi. The illusionary beast palm once again carried a sharp wind and smashed toward Melina's head. The last trace of do-chi in her body was exhausted. No matter how unwilling Melina was, she could only let out a miserable laugh. Now, Melina no longer had the slightest ability to resist. Just as Melina was about to go all out and drag one of them down with her in the sky, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly resounded without any warning. A stream of light suddenly flashed in front of Melina. Facing the huge, illusory beast palm, a sword light flashed through the air. Pucci, the sword light slashed through the beast palm without any hindrance. The beast palm, that was purely made up of do-chi, was directly cut into two halves. Then, the slash turned into a slap. As if swatting a fly, the sword light heavily slapped the scarred man's chest. Bang! The scarred man screamed. His body flew backward and heavily smashed into the desert not far away. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1923. The sudden turn of events shocked both Melina and the ugly man, who had sealed off Melina's escape route and hadn't been able to react from beginning to end. At this moment, Melina, the hideous man, and the scarred man who was knocked to the ground finally recognized the newcomer and were instantly immersed in her appearance. There was no other reason other than her beauty. Purple light particles undulated around her. She wore a purple light armor that looked like a formal dress. Every part of her body was covered in a transparent gauze. She held a huge spike-shaped sword in her hand. The girl appeared without any warning and captured the three of them with her beautiful aura without warning. It was a young girl with a purple ponytail that was tied up with a butterfly knot. She was Toka. At the same time, in the sky, several other air-piercing sounds could be heard. Kotori, Kurumi, Miku, and Yukino, who were still in casual clothes, landed on the ground with Mordred's origami. They stood around Toka without any pattern. The ugly man couldn't help but take a step back. He didn't know if it was because he suddenly saw so many beautiful girls and felt inferior about his appearance, or if he was really shocked by the girls that fell from the sky. "Who are you people?" Melina gazed at the group of young ladies in astonishment, as though she were bewildered by the fact that she was rescued by a group of young ladies who were younger than her. But for some unknown reason, Melina had a feeling that she had seen 3 or 4 of these girls somewhere before. For example, the petite young lady with twin ponytails who had a nonchalant expression and sucked on a lollipop. For example, the charming young lady with beautiful, long, black hair, long bangs covering one of her eyes, and an elegant, sweet smile. Also, the young lady with long, purple hair who saved her and the adorable doll-like young lady with a bunny plushie seemed familiar, but Melina couldn't recall where she had seen them before. Melina couldn't recall who they were and could only ask with a vigilant expression. "Who are you?" Kotori revealed a mischievous smile at Melina's vigilant expression. "Just passers-by." This sentence, Melina choked on her words. Fast *RD. At this moment, the scarred man struggled to stand up from the ground and clutched his chest. It seemed like he was injured. The hideous man stood up as soon as he saw the scarred man. It was as though he had found his backbone. He ran to his side hurriedly. "How dare you hurt me?" The scarred man stared at the group of young ladies with a gloomy expression. "Even if you beg for mercy, I won't let you go." The ugly man seemed to have calmed down from the sudden change. His gaze swept across Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijio, Yukino, and Origami. The six of them were so outstanding that they couldn't be picked on, and a trace of lust appeared in his eyes. When Kotori and Origami saw this, their expressions turned gloomy. Toka, Meijio, and Yukino also showed disgust. Only Kurumi's expression didn't change. Instead, her smile became brighter. However, those who knew Kwang-san would know that Kwang-san was truly murderous at this moment. Let me tell you something. Not everyone can be saved, and not everyone can be intervened in every situation. The scarred man's eyes gradually filled with a cold glint. He yelled at his companions. "Kill them! Kill!" The hideous man laughed sinisterly. "That's a pity." The scarred man woke up from his rage and understood the hideous man's intention. He began to pay attention to the group of young ladies and sneered. "That's right, that's a pity. Capture them and let them have a taste of what it's like to be dead." This time, the ugly man straightforwardly nodded his head in agreement. The two of them let out a loud cry in unison as a rich dough chi current erupted from their bodies. Two illusionary beast shadows appeared behind them as they roared towards the sky. Roar! The beast-like roars shook the air and stirred up a violent shockwave. It was mixed with thick gravel that spread in all directions like a tornado. "Be careful!" Mileena's expression changed. "They're both rank 8 powerhouses." In Mileena's opinion, Toka was only able to save her from the scarred man because of her sneak attack. It wasn't because of her strength. After all, the group of young ladies hadn't started fighting yet. Apart from Toka, the other young ladies hadn't even put on their spiritual equipment. Their aura couldn't be detected by those weaker than them. As for Origami, although she could erupt with strength that wasn't weaker than the other young ladies, she was just an ordinary young lady. Her strength was obtained by controlling Mordred on her body. She didn't have the aura of a powerhouse to speak of. This way, everyone would judge the strength of the young ladies based on their first impression. In other words, they judged based on their age. Therefore, who would find a group of young ladies who weren't even 20 years old difficult to deal with? Not to mention Mileena. Even the scar man and the ugly man felt the same way. "I'll stop them." Mileena struggled to get up and yelled at the group of young ladies. "Help me bring an important message to the Baruba Empire's capital." Hearing this, the scar man and the ugly man couldn't sit still anymore. The reason why they were so desperate to kill Mileena wasn't just because they suffered a huge loss in her hands. Not only did she kill one of their companions, but she also managed to escape from their trap. More importantly, it was because of the news that Mileena had. If that news really spread to Monarch City, the two of them would definitely die no matter what. "Be a good boy and surrender." The scarred man and the ugly man immediately leaped up, creating a distance between each other. Then, their figures flew out as if they were drawing a circle together, drawing two semicircular arcs, attacking Mileena at the same time. It seemed that the two of them were planning to silence her first. Since there were already 6 young ladies here who were many times more beautiful than Mileena, the two of them were no longer interested in her. This caused Mileena to be shocked. Just as she was about to shout something, Kotori looked at the 2 ugly freaks with an expressionless face and pursed her lips. 2 type 8 powerhouses? Such trash. Not to mention now that they hadn't undergone a transformation with the mystical pond water, even before any of the young ladies here could deal with them in a matter of minutes. "Let me do it." Without waiting for the rest of the young ladies to speak, and before Mileena could speak, Meijio stepped forward with an unhappy expression. A bunch of filthy men, even standing in the same place as them and breathing the same air makes one feel uncomfortable. As expected, other than my dear, the rest of the men are all disgusting worms. Upon hearing her words, the group of young ladies who knew that Meijio hated men other than Wu Yin nodded indifferently. On the other hand, Mileena's expression froze. On the other hand, the scar man and the ugly man's expressions turned sluggish. Their eyes were filled with chilling anger. Shortly after, their speed increased abruptly. The beast shadows behind them lifted their enormous claws and emitted an intimidating aura under the illumination of their battle aura. As the scarred man and the ugly man drew closer, the disgust on Mei Jio's face intensified, as though she had eaten something unpleasant. She took in a deep breath. Ah! In the next moment, a high-pitched voice sounded from Mei Jio's mouth. At the same time, a circular, formless, and colorless ripple suddenly spread out with Mei Jio at the center. In the blink of an eye, it violently collided with the scarred man and the ugly man. Boom! In an instant, a loud, muffled sound echoed in the desert. Pucci, the scarred man, and the ugly man who were hit by the invisible ripples spat out mouthfuls of blood as though they had been hit by a truck. They flew backward in an extremely miserable posture and smashed into the desert, stirring up a few meters of sand and dust. With just a single strike, the two-tier 8 powerhouses were defeated once again. Mileena's expression was completely frozen. The scarred man and the ugly man who struggled to lift their heads in the sand and looked at Mei Jio with disgust in their eyes. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they cried out involuntarily. Type 9 Powerhouse! Chapter 1924. Tier 9 Powerhouse. These 4 words made Mileena, the scarred man, and the ugly man completely dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. Was this young girl who kept saying, "Apart from my dear, all other men are disgusting bugs even 20 years old"? She shouldn't be, right? A Tier 9 powerhouse who isn't even 20 years old? I've never heard of such a person before. He had heard of Mileena, the scarred man, and the ugly man before. Currently, Ailu's princess, Sylph's fiancé, was the youngest person in history to reach the 9th order. But he was at least 20 years old, wasn't he? In front of them was an extremely beautiful young lady whose face was filled with disgust. She was at most 17 or 18 years old. If the other party was a powerhouse of the 8th step, perhaps Mileena, the scarred man, and the ugly man could still reluctantly accept it. But if the other party was a powerhouse of the 9th step, who could accept it? Since when did a Tier 9 powerhouse become so cheap? However, no matter how much Mileena, the scarred man, and the ugly man rejected this fact in their hearts, and whether or not the other party was a powerhouse of the 9th stage, this young girl in front of them was indeed an existence that could casually defeat 2 powerhouses of the 8th stage with a single move, making them unable to stand up. Therefore, it was impossible for the scarred man and the ugly man to be a match for this terrifying young woman. Not to mention the disgust on Mei Jio's face. The scarred man and the ugly man could foresee that if they were to fall into her hands, then their chances of survival would be 0. Not to mention, the 2 of them have joined the demonic beast camp. They're traitors to the human world. TSK. Thinking of this, the scarred man and the ugly man didn't even have the intention to exchange glances with each other. Almost at the same time, they forcefully propped up their heavily injured bodies, disregarding the continuous spurting of blood from their injuries, and jumped up as if they had gone crazy. They fled into the distance. Chase them. Seeing the 2 shameless, ugly people running away without even thinking, Mileena, who was still in a daze, immediately came back to her senses. Don't let those 2 traitors get away. However, hearing Mileena's shout, Mei Jio didn't do as she was told. Instead, she pouted unhappily and turned around. He walked back toward them. Only then did Mileena remember that she wasn't even sure if the other party was a friend or foe. Immediately, she became a little nervous. After all, standing in front of Mileena was a terrifying existence that could defeat 2 powerhouses of the 8th order in an instant. 9th-stage powerhouse. That was an existence that even Mileena had to fear. Just as Mileena was about to step back and distance herself from Mei Jio, Coterie, who had been observing Mileena thoughtfully, spoke up. All right, there are already people chasing after them. Hearing this, Mileena stared blankly for a moment before she finally realized that something was amiss. Among the group of 6, there was a girl with a charming smile on her face. The beautiful girl whose eyes were covered by long bangs had disappeared from the scene at some point in time. She was nowhere to be seen. Discovering this, Mileena could not help but be overwhelmed with shock. When, Milena finally realized. To be able to move together with a ninth-stage powerhouse and seem to have a good relationship, how could a group of mysterious girls be ordinary people? The answer was naturally no. Looking at the girls who were not older than her, Milena could not help but have a thought that made her want to laugh out loud. These girls, could it be that they were all ninth-stage powerhouses? This answer, no one could give Milena an answer, nor did they have the time to give her an answer. Not long after, a wriggling shadow suddenly emerged from the yellow sand, and within the shadow, two people slowly emerged from it. It was the scarred man and the ugly man who had fled for their lives. However, at this time, these two veteran powerhouses no longer had the aura of a living person. Their eyes were wide open, and their faces were filled with fear and despair. It was unknown what they saw before they died, or what kind of punishment they were subjected to, but it made people feel a chill in their hearts. At the same time, the elegant young lady, who only revealed a single wine-red eye, slowly emerged from the shadow. Only when her heels emerged from the ground did the squirming shadow solidify and transform into the shadow of the young lady. Aurora Kurumi tilted her head. She did not even look at the ugly man and the scarred man on the ground. Her tone was still as elegant and seductive as before. I thought I could play for a while longer. Hearing these words, Milena could not help but feel a chill in her heart. She clenched her teeth and forced a smile. May I know who you are, sirs? Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino did not speak. Only Kotori had a faint smile on her face. I am Itsuka Kotori. Itsuka Kotori? Milena had an idea. Her eyes widened as she looked at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino. She cried out in surprise. It's you guys? As the direct disciple of the Moma clan, the #1 clan in the Bruba Empire, how could Milena not have studied at the Spalier World Academy before? In the Spalier World Academy, each of the 3 empires and 9 great houses had their own factions. For example, Sylph's Snow Song, Feifei's Deadly Forest, Bingling's Sea of Frozen Ice, and Bishi's Crimson Land were among the 12 strongest factions in the academy. Before Milena reached the Type 8 realm, she was a member of the Ma family of the Bruba Empire. She was a special student of the Ma family, one of the 12 strongest factions in the Silveria World Institute. At that time, Milena was already at the peak of rank 7. She was on the same level as Feifei, Bingling, and Bishi. However, due to the Bruba Empire's preference for males, she wasn't able to become the leader of the Moma clan. Even so, she still managed to occupy one of the top 10 spots. Good times didn't last long. Ever since Wu Yin led his summoned creatures into the Spalier World Academy and occupied a few spots in the Academy tournament, Milena was pushed out of the top 10. Later on, Milena witnessed how Wu Yin defeated Prince Jafar of the Baruba Empire and Prince Kaya of the Fayer Empire, easily obtaining victory. At that time, she was filled with admiration for Wu Yin. It was a pity that after that, Wu Yin brought the girls by his side and applied to graduate from the Spalier World Academy, disappearing from Milena's sight. Later on, all sorts of news about Wu Yin reached Milena's ears. For example, he had become the fiancé of Princess Sylph of the Ailu Empire, or the youngest Type 9 powerhouse in history. This made Milena realize that the two of them were not from the same world. With a sudden epiphany, she broke through to the Type 8 realm and applied to graduate from the Spalier World Academy, becoming a city manager. In other words, Milena's breakthrough to the Type 8 realm was largely due to Wu Yin. If Wu Yin knew about this, his jaw would drop to the ground. In all honesty, Wu Yin really didn't know that he had someone who admired him. He even helped her break through, and he didn't even know the name of this person. However, for Milena, who had been paying attention to Wu Yin, she had naturally heard of the girls by his side. She had even caught a glimpse of them from afar. Just now, Milena didn't think of it, but now she finally remembered. This was the reason why Milena felt familiar with Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino. Kotori also remembered that she had seen Milena a few times when she was dealing with the 12 factions in the Spalier World Academy. That was why she had such an expression and saved Milena from the scar-faced man and the ugly man. Looking at Coteries' expression, Milena's expression became awkward. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I don't mind. Coterie looked straight at Milena. Compared to that, I'm more interested in why you're being chased. We've been betrayed. Milena's expression changed as she bit her lips. No, I should say that the Baruba Empire is about to be betrayed. Chapter 1925. The Baruba Empire is about to be betrayed? Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijio, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls were all stunned. Looking at the group of girls in front of her, Milena was a little hesitant. She didn't know if she should trust them and leak the information that she had obtained with great difficulty. After all, even though 4 of the girls were from the same school as Milena, they didn't interact much in the Spalier World Academy. Even if they did, they would only meet a few times when they represented their respective factions. Forget about being familiar with them. It would be a stretch to call them strangers. With such a group of girls, it was hard to guarantee that they were trustworthy, wasn't it? But on second thought, Milena felt that if she kept this information to herself, there might be a chance that no one would know about it. At that time, the only thing waiting for the Baruba Empire would be destruction. Furthermore, if these girls wanted to do something to her, with the strength that Kurumi and Meijio displayed, Milena wouldn't be able to resist. Thinking of this, Milena gritted her teeth and revealed the information she got from one of the traders after falling into their trap. It turns out that the trader had secretly found the Beast King and surrendered to him. It wasn't only the Tier 8 powerhouses in the city that Milena was in charge of. There were traders in other cities as well. Due to the fact that 80% of the Baruba Empire's territory was desert, the connection between the cities was even weaker than the Ailu and Fea empires. Under such circumstances, the Baruba Empire was different from the Ailu and Fea empires. All the cities in the Baruba Empire were unified by the royal family and assigned to the 3 great clans to manage. Through this method, communication between cities was strengthened. The first clan was the Mama clan. The second clan was the Vance clan. The third clan was the Mama clan. Every city manager in the Baruba Empire was someone from these 3 great clans. It was because of this system that Milena was able to become a Tier 8 powerhouse. She was entrusted by the patriarch of the Mama clan to manage a city. Manage it. Situations like Milena's were very common in the Baruba Empire. Basically, even the direct descendants of the family would have to break through to rank 8 to reach rank 8. They would be entrusted with the management of a city. It could also be considered a form of training. However, but now, this system had become a true crisis for the Baruba Empire. The reason was simple. Other than Milena's city, there were other traders in other cities. In that case, the chances of these traders being from the 3 great clans were very high. There was a traitor among the 3 great families of the empire? Was this not a crisis? The 3 great clans were the true leaders of the Baruba Empire. Since there were traitors in the upper echelons of the empire, the effect they could have was absolutely fatal. For example, as long as there were traitors who knew the method to remove the barrier around the Baruba Empire's capital city, they would remove the barrier when the demonic beasts attacked the capital city. When the flying demonic beasts charged into the capital city, the casualties would be disastrous. Another example would be if some of the traitors put poison in the food of the city guards, or even the food of the Baruba Empire's royal family and the 3 great clans. Then the Baruba Empire would be finished. But now, no matter if it's Ailu, Baruba, or Fea Empire, they all gave the same order to gather all their forces in one of their cities. They gave up on the other cities to fight against the demonic beasts. This made it easier for the traitors to sneak into their cities. This was no longer a matter that could be solved with a joke. Milena even suspected that the Beast King had given the other traitors an order to wipe out all the experts gathered in the other cities, leaving only the traitors to sneak into the capital city. This way, not only would the capital city's forces be greatly reduced, it might even be filled with traitors. This way, there would be no need for a war at all. Just let the traitors and humans kill each other and engage in internal strife. In the end, The traders would openly open the city gates and let the magical beasts swagger into the city to wreak havoc. The Baruba Empire was truly standing on the border of destruction. The royal family and the three great clans have yet to discover that there were so many traitors among the humans. This is the most dangerous thing. Therefore, after listening to Lena's explanation, except for Toka, Yoshino, and Miku, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami, who were still confused, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami frowned. This is troublesome. That was the first thing Kotori said after listening to Lena's explanation. I didn't think this half-baked beast king who used the power of a false god would actually use humans to plot against us. It seems like we have underestimated demonic beasts. Although there had never been a saying, in the hearts of humans, magical beasts were just a group of powerful wild beasts. They had nothing to do with strategies, plans, or stratagems. It was hard to imagine that a group of beasts would make use of the strengths of humans. Kotori and the other girls are no exception. It's because of this subconscious impression that the Baruba Empire's royal family and three great clans never thought that there would be traitors among their own people. That's why they gathered their forces so recklessly. From this point of view, the situation in the Ailu Empire is undoubtedly much better. At the very least, the muscular man who led the demonic beast to attack the Ailu Empire is not a strategist. He only knows how to attack recklessly. On the other hand, the Beast King who led the demonic beast to attack the Baruba Empire isn't as reckless as the muscular man. Humans are truly hopeless creatures. Kwang San sighed. They are demonic beasts who view humans as food. They even want to turn the entire Spalier world into a hunting ground for humans. They won't accept humans. Even if they surrender, they won't be able to escape death when the Spalier world is transformed into a world of demonic beasts. Why would they choose to surrender? You can't expect every human to be a righteous person. You can't expect all humans to be unafraid of death. Origami said coldly. In order to survive, humans will use all sorts of methods. Betrayal is one of them, even if they know they will be despised. Origami's words silenced all the girls in the room. In order to survive, it's a cruel and realistic reason. Even if this reason seemed to be a group of foolish humans who couldn't see the situation clearly and didn't hesitate to betray the entire human world for this reason, it couldn't be denied that the vast majority of humans were existences who would sell everything for their own survival. This isn't just limited to humans. Isn't it the same among demonic beasts? The only difference is that humans will use all sorts of methods to survive, while demonic beasts will use their teeth and claws to survive. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, they will use their flesh and blood to build a space for survival. Perhaps the demonic beasts in charge of invading the Baruba Empire saw the similarities and differences between humans and demonic beasts. That's why they used their survival instincts to force humans to destroy themselves. No matter what, I have to get to the capital before the demonic beasts attack again. Lena shook her head. She didn't want to talk about this uncomfortable topic. Right now, most of the powerhouses in the cities are gathered in the capital. There must be traitors everywhere in the capital. I have to bring this news back. Due to the Baruba Empire being a desert, demonic beasts are very adaptable to the environment. However, there are also demonic beasts that are very picky about their environment. Due to the terrain restrictions, the Baruba Empire's magic beasts had a much harder time than the other two empires. Every time they attacked, they would have to expend a lot of energy. So far, the Baruba Empire's capital had only been attacked 2 or 3 times in the past few days. This could be considered an advantage. However, it also gave the traitors more chances to sneak into the capital. Lena could imagine the disaster that would befall King City the next time the magical beasts attacked King City and colluded with the traitors in King City from both inside and outside. The group of girls also looked at each other and nodded their heads. Chapter 1926. In the middle of the endless desert, there were 2 towering mountain ranges. The mountain ranges looked like deep valleys. They looked like 2 giant fingers clasped together, towering into the clouds. Between the gaps of the mountain range that looked like two fingers, an incomparably huge city was located here. It was like a bridge connecting the mountain range. It was very spectacular. This was the most important city in the Baruba Empire. It was located between two gigantic mountain ranges. The Baruba Empire's royal city was different from the Ailu Empire's royal city. The Baruba Empire's royal city was more like a fortress than a city. Not only was the surface area huge, but the entire body of the city wall was also made of pitch-black underground rocks, just like the barbed rock walls in the abyss. Not only did it have an abnormally terrifying defensive power, if something were to be placed on the barbs on the city wall, the result would definitely be flesh lacerated. This kind of wall was like a hedgehog. Just looking at it gave people goosebumps, not to mention that there were still a lot of city guards stationed on top of the wall at this time. If one looked closely, they would notice that on top of the walls, soldiers were armed with bows and arrows. Behind them were groups of magicians with staffs in hand. They looked like they were ready to attack at any moment. This kind of arrangement was similar to the one in the Ailu Empire city. In addition, there was the terrifying city wall and the faintly discernible barrier that rippled like water. If either the Ailu Empire or the Faya Empire were to attack the Baruba Empire city, they would have to pay a heavy price to break through the walls. It was a pity that this time, it wasn't the Empire that was attacking this fortress, but the real magical beast army. With the magical beast's fearless attacks, the porcupine walls didn't have any effect at all. It might even provoke the magical beast's bloodlust. Flying magical beasts didn't even need to care about the walls. They only needed to attack from the sky. This was the worst enemy in history. Because of this, the warriors and magi on the walls of the Baruba Empire's royal city didn't relax for even a moment. Their faces were tense. They didn't know when the magical beasts would attack again. Fortunately, unlike the Ailu Kingdom's royal city, the Baruba Kingdom's royal city was built in the middle of two towering mountain ranges. Both sides were blocked by mountain ranges. Behind Monarch City, the two mountain ranges were directly connected. In other words, the capital of the Baruba Empire was located in the middle of a huge U-shaped mountain range. If the magical beasts wanted to attack the capital of the Baruba Empire, they would have to either attack from above or from the front. Hence, the city guards didn't need to be on guard against the magical beast army coming from all directions like the Ailu Empire. All they needed to do was to keep an eye on the sky. Compared to the Ailu Empire, the city guards were much more relaxed. Moreover, the desert was also an extremely advantageous terrain. It was very difficult for the magical beasts to charge through the yellow sand. The flying magical beasts would also be attacked by the sand from time to time. Whether it was their condition, vision, or breathing, it was very difficult for them. As a result, the magical beasts had not gained any benefits from their attacks so far. They could only make 2 or 3 symbolic attacks, which did not cause any pain or itch at all. Therefore, the Baruba Empire city had a huge advantage in terms of terrain. The citizens were also very used to fighting in the desert. Their people were also very good at fighting in the desert. Based on the current situation, the Baruba Empire might be the only one who could defend King's City from being invaded by the magical beasts. As long as there were no accidents. However, this accident was already buried in the Baruba Empire's city. The Baruba Empire's city, which was supposed to be the most difficult to attack, was now the most likely to be breached. At a certain moment, a flying ship that couldn't be seen with the naked eye broke through the heavy obstacles in the sky. The ship screeched in the air, and the engine roared as it headed towards the Baruba Empire city. "We're here." In the command room of Fraxinus, Melina pointed at the image of the Baruba Empire's city on the screen. "That's the Baruba Empire's city." Wow. Looking at the big screen showing the fortress-like King's City sandwiched between two towering mountains, the girls all exclaimed in amazement. So this is what they call a natural stronghold. Kurumi couldn't help but gasp in awe. With a city like this, the Beast King who led the attack on the Baruba Empire's magical beast army must have a headache. This should make things a lot easier for us. Kotori sucked on her lollipop as she stared at the city on the screen. She nodded without a change in expression. I finally understand why the Beast King needs the help of a group of traders. If they want to rely on brute force to break through this fortress, unless that pseudo-demigod Beast King personally takes action, they won't be able to occupy this dangerous place, even if they use all of their magical beasts. After saying this, Coterie looked at Melina. We're about to land. You'll be in charge of communicating with the city. I understand. Melina nodded heavily. The engine on Fraxinus's back revved up, and Fraxinus shot forward at an incredible speed. It didn't take long for Fraxinus to appear in the sky above the Baruba Empire's capital. Fraxinus's figure slowly appeared in the sky above the Baruba Empire's capital. The sudden appearance of a giant airship in the sky naturally caused a commotion among the city guards. They were shocked out of their wits and almost launched an attack. Only after realizing that it was a rather peculiar airship did they calm down. After all, magical beasts wouldn't ride airships, right? Therefore, all the city guards knew that the intruder must be a human. At the same time, a black or white stream of light soared into the sky from the airship. Like fireworks, it directly exploded in the sky, forming a strange pattern of a beast's head. That was Melina's signal. Only by sending this signal would the Baruba Empire's barrier be opened. Only then would outsiders be able to enter the city. In fact, it was a signal used by the Moma family to communicate with each other. It's just that it's been used by the Baruba Empire's 3 major families to open the barrier. As expected, the guards let down their guard after seeing the signal. They sent someone to contact the people controlling the barrier. 5 or 10 minutes later, an entrance that was just big enough for Fraxinus to pass through opened. On the city wall, some of the city guards began to make hand gestures to guide Fraxinus's arrival. Coterie didn't act alone. She had the Misaka sisters, who were controlling Fraxinus, follow the directions of the city guards and enter the barrier at a constant speed. Originally, there was an oasis between the 2 mountains. The Baruba Empire was built on top of this oasis. Because of this, the interior of the Baruba Empire's capital was no different from a normal city. It had the usual streets and roads, unlike the yellow sand outside. Of course, there was also a floating plaza for airships to land and take off. After Fraxinus entered the barrier under the guidance of the city guards, 4 airships flew over from the floating plaza and stopped in front, behind, left, and right of Fraxinus. Like a prisoner being escorted, they led Fraxinus to the floating plaza and landed there. When Fraxinus landed, Coterie, Kurumi, Toka, Miku Origami, and Yoshino brought Melina and 5,000 Misaka sisters out of the airship. They instantly filled up the floating plaza and gave the city guards another shock. Why, a middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader glanced at the girls with vigilance. Which city are you from? I'm Melina of Garas, Melina of the Emoma family. Melina quickly stood up. I have an important matter to discuss with His Majesty. Chapter 1927. The Baruba Empire's Royal Palace. In the central hall of the palace, the most prestigious figures of the Baruba Empire were all gathered here. It was said that all of the influential figures in the Baruba Empire were gathered here, but there were also some young people in their teens and 20s. They were all direct descendants of the Baruba Empire's royal family and the 3 great clans. Those who could stand here were all destined to become leaders of the royal family and the 3 great clans. At this moment, these people were lined up neatly in 2 rows, surrounding a round table in the middle and standing at the corner of the hall. The people sitting at the round table were the ones with the most authority in the Baruba Empire. The leader was the emperor of the Baruba Empire, Gada. Sitting next to him was the most prestigious prince of the Baruba Empire, the one who was supposed to be the next emperor, Jafar. Other than these 2, there were 3 other old men in their 50s and 60s. They sat on the 2 seats to Gada's left and the one next to Jafar. Sitting first to Gada's left was an old man with a face full of wrinkles and long black hair that reached his waist. He was the head of the Baruba Empire's #1 clan, the Morma family, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council, Kulin. Sitting second to Gada's left, next to Kulin, was another old man with a frown on his face. He seemed to be dissatisfied with something. He was the head of the Vance family, the second clan of the Baruba Empire, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council. Will, sitting next to Jaffer, who was the last seat at the round table, was an elder who had his head lowered and seemed to be deep in thought. He was the head of the Mani family, the third clan of the Baruba Empire, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council. Goodbye. These 5, including Jaffer, who was still developing, were the most respected figures in the Baruba Empire, second only to the Emperor. Apart from these 5 people, like the current heads of the 3 great clans, they didn't have the right to sit, so they obediently joined the 2 rows at the side of the hall and stood at the front. They looked like they were waiting for orders. From this, one could see the difference between the Baruba Empire and the Ailu Empire. First of all, among the people who were allowed to enter this hall, there were almost no women, and even if there were only 2 or 3 people bustling about. One could only imagine how strict the Baruba Empire's preference for males was. Second, status, class, and so on were also clearly distinguished. Those with status and the right to speak could sit in the 5 seats of the round table. Those with lower status could only obediently stand in the 2 rows. Moreover, the order of the rows was also very particular. The higher the status, the closer to the round table. Those with lower status were directly at the back. The people of the Baruba Empire didn't seem surprised by the fact that there was a clear hierarchy that favored males. However, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Origami, and Yoshino, who were standing in the center of the hall, didn't seem to think much of it. Therefore, the group of young ladies did not behave like Milena, who was explaining in fear and trepidation. They kept their backs slightly bent and even straightened their legs. Instead, they stood in scattered groups and behaved as they did in the past. Although they were talking about the past, only Kotori kept sucking on her lollipop with a nonchalant look on her face. Kurumi kept standing there with her head tilted to one side with a faint smile. As usual, she had an enchanting yet mysterious look on her face. As for Origami, she still had an expressionless face. Toka, on the other hand, was standing there uncomfortably with a dissatisfied look on her face. Yoshino, on the other hand, was cowering behind Toka, holding her hand tightly. Obviously, he was still affected. However, Toka and Yoshino were fine. At least they weren't used to it. Miko, on the other hand, was frowning. Her beautiful eyes flashed with anger from time to time. The Baruba Empire favored males over females. Therefore, those who could obtain higher status were mostly men. Naturally, those who could enter this hall were all men. Unfortunately, Miko hated men the most. Therefore, with Mei Jio's unscrupulous personality, it was already very fortunate that she was able to hold back from flipping out when she was being sized up, scrutinized, amazed, and brazenly scanned her body from head to toe. With Melina's explanation, time passed bit by bit. Everyone present was already very surprised when they heard that Melina had led the experts from the city she was in charge to set up an ambush. When they heard that there were traitors among them, their faces were filled with rage. However, when they heard that there were other traitors in the capital, even Gudda could not help but be moved, let alone the people around him. He almost stood up. "Is what you said true?" Gudda looked at Melina with a sharp gaze. "You should know that if you lie, it'll be a serious crime, right? Please, please, please believe me, your majesty." Melina endured Gudda's sharp gaze, gritted her teeth, and bent down again. These lords were there at the time. They witnessed everything with their own eyes. Hearing this, everyone's gaze once again gathered on the group of girls. There were still some who were sizing them up, some who were scrutinizing them, some who were stunned, and some who blatantly swept their eyes over the girls' bodies, causing the girls to frown one after another. Other than Jaffer, who had some interaction with Wu Yin in the Spalier World Academy, everyone, including Gudda, couldn't help but have a look of suspicion on their faces. The people here were all people with status. Naturally, they had more or less heard of this group of girls. Gudda couldn't help but think of the young rank 9 powerhouse he met on the Emperor Island. His expression softened and his tone relaxed. "Ladies, is Melina's matter true?" Among the group of girls, Kotori, who had a calm and sharp mind and was also the commander of Ratatoskr, was unsurprisingly the leader. Naturally, it was Coterie who stepped forward. Coterie didn't try to verify Milena's words. Instead, she spoke of what she was certain of. I don't know if Milena's news is true or not. However, when I arrived, there were indeed 2 rank 8 powerhouses who wanted to kill Milena. Thus, we save her. Hearing this, many people frowned. However, this time, they frowned because of Coterie's way of speaking. Woman, pay attention to your way of speaking. Then, someone's voice rang out. The one asking you is the Emperor of the Baruba Empire. It's already a great favor that we don't ask outsiders to bow to us. Don't think you have the right to be rude. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere of the whole place changed. If the atmosphere before was heavy, then the atmosphere now was tense. The kind that could explode at any moment. It was as if everyone agreed with that voice, as if it was a matter of course. They began to look down on the group of young girls with a gaze that they thought was a matter of course. It was obvious that they were the masters of this place. Of course, in the eyes and hearts of the group of young ladies, such an action was nothing more than pure idiocy. Coterie couldn't help but sneer and turn her head away. Maggio scoffed in disgust. A bunch of gorillas who only know how to train their muscles want to learn etiquette from humans? Everyone's expression changed. Even Gudda puckered his brows. Jaffer was the only one who cursed inwardly. In the Baruba Empire, it was deeply ingrained in their minds that females were inferior to males. Wasn't Jaffer also hostile towards Sylph because she was more talented and powerful than him? Therefore, in the eyes of the people here, being offended by a group of little girls was simply the greatest humiliation to them. Buzz, in the next instant, apart from Gudda, Jaffer, Kun, Will, and Jebi, who were the 5 highest decision-makers, everyone else secretly circulated the combat aura in their bodies. They turned their auras into pressure that enveloped the group of girls. Chapter 1928. BZE. The high-ranking officials of the Baruba Empire unleashed their combat aura and turned it into a pressure that pressed down on the group of young ladies. The entire palace began to tremble. Compared to the Ailu and Fea empires, the Baruba Empire wasn't only different from the Baruba Empire. It was also different from the Baruba Empire's beast battle techniques. Its purpose was to mimic the attacks of dire beasts and their ferocious fighting style. It was truly unique in terms of attack power, defense, specificity, uniqueness, and so on. It was far superior to all the other combat techniques that belonged to the Baruba Empire. The beast battle techniques didn't refer to a specific battle technique, but rather a whole system of battle techniques. Just like how all spells that use fire to attack were called fire spells. In the Baruba Empire, battle techniques that mimic the attacks of vicious beasts and their fighting styles were called beast battle techniques. Naturally, there were good and bad beast battle techniques. For example, Milena's beast battle technique that allowed her to summon the shadow of a scorpion was a high-level beast battle technique. Jaffer's beast battle technique that allowed him to summon the shadow of a blood-colored beast was one of the top beast battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. As for Magnubi's beast battle technique that contained the power of lightning, it was definitely one of the top beast battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. It could even be said that it was Magnubi's beast battle technique. The reason why he explained so much was because he wanted to make things clear. Not only were there good and bad beast battle techniques, but they were also the most popular battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. Because of this, mages needed to cultivate more than warriors. In the same rank and level, mages were generally stronger than warriors. Logically speaking, mages should be more important than warriors. But because of the beast battle techniques, the Baruba Empire valued warriors more. Therefore, other than the fact that men were superior to women, the Baruba Empire also respected warriors. Under such circumstances, one could only imagine. The number of warriors in the Baruba Empire was much more than mages. Therefore, the Baruba Empire officials in the palace were all powerful beast battle skills, and the beast battle skills they practiced were all high-level beast battle skills. Therefore, the Baruba Empire officials in the palace were all powerful beast battle skills, and they were all high-level beast battle skills. The only thing that filled the hall of the palace was fighting spirit. There was no magic. Behind each of them, there was also a ferocious and huge beast shadow. There were almost all kinds of beast shadows. In this way, the palace hall looked like it was surrounded by roaring, ferocious beasts. At this very moment, these ferocious beasts were roaring towards the sky as they released a powerful pressure. It was as if they were carrying a heavy mountain as they ruthlessly pressed towards the center of the hall. Immediately, Milena, who was not far away from the group of girls, felt her shoulders sink and her face turn pale. With a paw sound, she directly knelt on the ground. The officials around her were all members of the royal family and the three great clans. The older ones were all powerhouses of the 8th step, while the younger ones were all talented geniuses of the 7th step at the very least. When these people released their pressure together, a mere 8th-step powerhouse like Milena naturally couldn't bear it. However, in the face of such pressure, apart from the cowardly Yoshino who shrunk her neck slightly, the rest of the girls didn't even change their expressions and endured it. No, it wasn't that their expressions didn't change. At the very least, Toka and Mijio's faces showed traces of anger. Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami's eyes also turned cold. To be honest, the girls didn't think that they could rely on their group of 9th-step powerhouses and the 5,000 Misaka sisters, who were all 8th-step powerhouses, to show off their might in the Baruba Empire. From start to finish, their performance couldn't be said to be average, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. However, since he had used the excuse of women and lack of manners as a matter of course, but in fact, it was an extremely absurd reason to make the young ladies bow and scrape, then he was being shameless. Against such people, the girls strictly carried out the principles that Wu Yin had mentioned more than once. We don't provoke others, but if others provoke us, we will trample them under our feet. At that moment, no matter if it was Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mijio, or even the cowardly Yoshino, all of them channeled the spiritual powers that belonged to elves in their bodies and circulated them quickly. Even though Origami wasn't an elf, she also secretly activated Mordred's magical power generation device and circulated the generated magical power. A circle of faint radiance emanated from her body. Boom! Like a resounding drum, the air trembled abruptly. An aura that was more powerful, majestic, dense, and heavy than the ones released by the Baruba Empire's upper echelons erupted without any warning. Under this powerful pressure, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups were like a shoal of sharks. They were swallowed up one bite at a time, breaking free from their master's control and going on a rampage. Like Melina, the Baruba Empire's upper echelons turned pale as though they had suffered a heavy blow. Many of them groaned and took a heavy step back. The pupils of Geda, Kun, Will, and Jebi, who had been staying silent, suddenly shrank. Disbelief appeared on their faces when they saw the group of girls suddenly erupt with a terrifying pressure. Jaffer even had a look of shock on his face. This level of aura wasn't something that a powerful being in the 8th step could release. At the very least, the 5 highest decision-makers of the Baruba Empire had never seen a powerful being in the 8th step who could release such an aura. In that case, it was obvious what level these young girls were at to be able to release such a level of pressure just by standing there. 9th step, 6 9th-step powerhouses. None of them were older than 20 years old, and one of them didn't even look 15 years old. Impossible. Impossible. The old patriarch of the Baruba Empire's #1 Ma family, Kun, muttered absent-mindedly like a crazy old man. It's impossible for there to be such young 9th-step powerhouses. Is this a lie? Will's expression changed drastically. Even if you're joking, there should be a limit. 6. Gobai's lips trembled. 6 9th-step powerhouses who aren't even 20 years old? Jaffer was even more astonished. When did they become so strong? Even Gouda was at a loss. It wasn't just the 5 highest decision-makers of the Baruba Empire. Even the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were in disbelief as they watched the young ladies release such powerful auras. Even their breathing became labored. As time passed, the auras of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were completely swallowed up by the young ladies' auras. The beasts behind them also became illusory, looking like they could collapse at any moment. Their master's face turned pale and red. Breathing became more and more difficult, and his chest became more and more stuffy. Even cold sweat flowed down his forehead. In the end, Jaffer, who had dealt with Wu Yin before and knew how incredible the young ladies beside him were, was the first to calm down. Father. Gouda was also startled awake. He saw the faces of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire changing between red and white. Stop. Kotori and Kurumi revealed different degrees of ruthlessness. Toka, Mijio, Origami, and Yoshino lifted their heads in understanding. Not only did the group of young ladies not stop, but they also collectively raised their auras to a whole new level. Pucci, 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 Pucci. In the next instant, all the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire in the hall spat out mouthfuls of blood. Amidst the howls of agony, some fell to their knees while others collapsed to the ground. Gouda, Will, and Gubai slammed the table and stood up. The emperor of the Baruba Empire had spoken out to stop them, but not only did they not listen, they even went from bad to worse. Just based on this point alone, Gouda could get the entire Baruba Empire to take down these 6 young ladies. The atmosphere in the hall turned heavy instantly. Chapter 1929. If anyone from the Baruba Empire was here, they would definitely be shocked by the scene in front of them. This was because, in terms of status, talent, strength, status, and background, these people who were more powerful than anyone else in the Baruba Empire were currently lying on the ground like they were terminally ill. There was even a pool of blood in front of them. As for the emperor and princes of the Baruba Empire, as well as the Type 9 powerhouses of the 3 great clans, all of them stood up, their faces filled with anger as they glared ahead. However, for the Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire to treat them so seriously and with such anger, it was actually 6 young girls who had not even reached adulthood yet. How could such a scene not be shocking? What was even more shocking was that the 2 sides clearly didn't seem to be comparable at all, but the air was filled with a heavy atmosphere of being evenly matched and confrontational, causing everyone to be puzzled even after thinking about it for a long time. Of course, only those who were not present would be confused. If they were present and saw the entire process of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire coughing up blood, then it would be understandable. The reason was that those seemingly young girls were all experts who didn't reveal their true strength. Type 9 powerhouses. All of them. At this point, Gouda, Will, and Gubai stared at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the rest of the girls, their eyes filled with uncertainty. No matter how much these 4 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire did not want to believe that the power they had spent their entire lives to obtain was now in the hands of a group of girls who were not even 20 years old, they had no choice but to accept this fact. Right now, there were 6 Type 9 powerhouses standing in front of Gouda and the rest. This was the truth. If both sides were to clash, the Baruba Empire would definitely be at a disadvantage. After all, only Gouda had reached the mid-Type 9 realm, while the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses were all at the initial Type 9 realm. This way, even if these girls were all initial stage Type 9 powerhouses, they only needed to send 3 of them to deal with the 3 Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire. The other 3 ganged up on Gouda. At that time, even if Gouda was a mid-Type 9, he would not be able to take on 3 Type 9 powerhouses. Once Gouda was defeated, the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses would join in. It was only a matter of time before the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses from the Baruba Empire were defeated. In terms of numbers, the Baruba Empire no longer had the upper hand. As for those below the 9th stage, that would be even more of a joke, because that wouldn't be called taking action, but rather throwing away one's life. Even if they really did make a move, it would cause a large number of casualties. That was absolutely unwise. It was precisely because of this that Will, and Jebi froze after slamming the table and standing up. A gloomy and hesitant expression also appeared in Gouda's eyes. Father, Jaffer, the only one who remained calm, looked at his father and shook his head. Everyone could tell what he meant. Gouda also calmed down and took a deep breath before speaking solemnly. What is the meaning of this? The moment he opened his mouth, he regretted it. Wasn't this a case of the guilty party complaining first? Shouldn't we be the ones saying that? As expected, Coteries' face revealed a mocking smile as she replied rudely. Your Majesty of the Baruba Empire, what is the meaning of this? It was obvious that the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were the ones who made the first move. Coterie and the rest were just retaliating. We were just exercising our rights. While Gouda was a loss for words, Kaluan glared coldly at Coterie. At least he had some foresight to be able to tell that Coterie was the leader of the group. Do you really think that the Baruba Empire is some weakling that you can offend? Offend? Kurumi tilted her head and smiled sweetly. Then, can you explain in simple terms, how do we offend you? This time, even Kaluan was at a loss for words. He couldn't possibly tell her that in the Baruba Empire, it was considered an offense if a woman didn't show her respect to a man. That was only effective when a man was stronger than a woman. Although the Baruba Empire had a culture where men were superior to women, they didn't treat women like slaves. At most, they subconsciously thought that women were weak. Otherwise, a woman like Melina wouldn't have been recognized and given a city to manage, even though she had a certain level of strength. Were the girls in front of him weak? It was because of this that the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were forced to lie on the ground. Therefore, this reason was complete nonsense, at least to those who weren't from the Baruba Empire. Seeing that Gouda and Kaluan were at a loss for words, Were spoke up with a frown. If that purple-haired woman hadn't insulted us, this wouldn't have happened. Don't you want to admit it? That's right. Gobai chimed in and pointed at Meijio. That woman insulted us. That's the truth. Meijio was about to explode when she heard this, but she was interrupted by Origami's lukewarm words. If you want to pursue the matter, it seems like someone was the one who provoked us in the beginning, right? Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino nodded furiously. Although Meijio's words were a bit vile, the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who looked down on women from the bottom of their hearts weren't any better. Enough, there's no point in saying anything more. Seeing that Kluin, Weir, and Gobai still wanted to say something, Kurumi closed her eyes and smiled. You should know that the fault isn't with us. It's with the way the Baruba Empire thinks. You're only trying to suppress us because you don't want to embarrass the Baruba Empire, right? Kaluan, Weir, and Gobai didn't know what to say. Their faces paled. Kurumi was right. If the people of the Baruba Empire want to look down on women, that's their business. We have no intention of standing up for women. Kotori looked straight into Gouda's eyes with a fiery glow. However, if this makes you think that we're the same as the women of the Baruba Empire, that we have to bow our heads to you, then we don't mind proving to you whether you have a right to make us do this. The faces of the 5 leaders of the Baruba Empire changed at the same time. How sad. Kurumi used a seductive tone to say the most hurtful words. An empire bound by the ideology of men being superior to women. If you think men should be superior to women, why don't you think about the principles of the Spalier world? The principles of the Spalier world. Gouda and the rest were stunned. Even the leaders of the Baruba Empire were stunned. Don't you understand? Kotori scanned the men around her and said word by word. The strong are supreme. Everyone held their breaths. Their faces stiffened. They couldn't say a word. That's right. In the Spalier world, status wasn't decided by gender. It wasn't status, background, or wealth. It was strength. As long as one had absolute strength and became a powerhouse, what status, background, and wealth couldn't be obtained. In the eyes of a true powerhouse, an ordinary concept was completely useless. As long as one was a rank 7 powerhouse, he could easily resist an army of 10,000 rank 5 powerhouses, not to mention the rank 8, rank 9, and even the demigod level, as well as the divine level that had never appeared again. Otherwise, how could the creator of the 3 empires be a divine-ranked fighter? How could the creator of the 3 empires be a divine-ranked fighter? In the Spalier world, A powerhouse had the right to surpass any royalty. The strong are supreme. These 4 words summed up the principles of the Spalier world. It also showed how shallow the concept of men being superior to women was. The Baruba Empire's people were furious, but they couldn't find any words to retort. They could only hold it in. The atmosphere grew heavier. Coterie pursed her lips. For the time being, let me pass on the news that I should pass on to you. Chapter 1930. What did you say? When Coterie finished, Cluin, Will, and Jebby all cried out at the same time. The guardian deity is not in the palace, but sealing the Beast King in the capital of alternate generations? Father, Jaffer couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up abruptly and stared at Gada, who was silent and had a dark look on his face. Is the guardian really not in the palace? Gada didn't say a word. His silence was equivalent to a tacit acknowledgement of the accuracy of Coterie's information, which made the faces of the Baruba Empire's upper echelons turn pale. The Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the palace, but the enemy had a Beast King. Although it was only a pseudo-demigod, it wasn't something a Class 9 powerhouse could compare to. It was said that the strong reigned supreme in the Spalier world. A rank 7 powerhouse could stop an army of 10,000 rank 5 powerhouses. If it was a pseudo-demigod, it could easily wipe out 10,000 rank 8 powerhouses. Of course, if it was a rank 9 powerhouse, they wouldn't need to mobilize so many people to stop a pseudo-demigod. But were rank 9 powerhouses so common? Even if Coterie, Kumi, Toka, Meijio, Origami, and Yoshino were included, the Baruba Empire would only have 10 rank 9 powerhouses. 10 rank 9 powerhouses. The strongest among them was only a mid-rank 9 powerhouse. The rest were all beginner rank 9 powerhouses. There was no way they could stop a pseudo-demigod. The higher-ups of the Baruba Empire had always thought that the guardian deity was in the palace. They also thought that the one who led the magical beast army to attack the Baruba Empire was the pseudo-divinity Beast King, who had been severely injured by Violet and was now sealed away. That was why they had been so relaxed, even when they heard that a large group of human traitors had sneaked into the palace. But now, the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire finally realized just how perilous the situation they were in. This was a crisis that could destroy the Empire at any time. Your Majesty, Kaluan asked in a questioning tone. Your Majesty already knew that the guardian deity wasn't in the palace, right? Why did he keep such an important matter a secret? So what if I did? Gada looked at Kaluan coldly. Can you think of a solution if I tell you? Korin clenched his teeth tightly, and his face grew paler and paler. Indeed, even if Gada were to announce the absence of the protector to the public, it would be useless. Not only would that not have any beneficial effects, but it would also cause the people of the Baruba Empire to waver and cause their morale to plummet. After all, the guardian deity was not around. However, the other party had a pseudo-demigod expert. The war the Baruba Empire was fighting wasn't really a war. It would be better to say that it was a deathbed struggle. Even if they managed to defeat the demonic beasts, the Baruba Empire's capital would still be destroyed as soon as the demigod Beast King joined the fray. This was the effect of being a strong cultivator. Therefore, the Spalier world had always believed that the strong were the most important, not the royalty. In front of the strong, the royalty was nothing. The current situation proved this point. The guardian god is not here, but the enemy has a pseudo-demigod expert. Not only that, the previous Beast King has actually advanced to the pseudo-demigod level. Even the combined efforts of 5 pseudo-demigod experts could only seal him. We'll side. If that's the case, even if we do have a way to deal with the Beast King, as long as the pseudo-demigod Beast King breaks out of the seal, the Spalier world will still be finished. It's not just the Spalier world. Even the Baruba Empire is in danger. Gobai laughed bitterly. Don't forget, didn't Melina say that there are traitors in our capital? The guardian deity was not here, but the enemy had a pseudo-demigod expert. Even if they had a way to deal with the pseudo-demigod Beast King, there was still the pseudo-demigod Beast King that all the demigods in the Spalier world could only barely seal. Not only that, but there were also traitors hiding in the capital. Each of these three factors could lead to the destruction of the Baruba Empire and the entire Spalier world. Originally, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups did not think that they would lose the war against the demonic beasts. The Baruba Empire's desert terrain was advantageous for the Baruba Empire's citizens to fight. The capital was also located in a natural stronghold. Compared to the demonic beasts that had left the behemoth forest to attack, the Baruba Empire had too many advantages in this war. If that was the case, how could they possibly lose? But now, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups had finally fallen from their absolute confidence to the bottom of the abyss. If this continued, the Baruba Empire would definitely be destroyed. Father, Jaffar's voice was a little hoarse. What should we do now? In the hall, all the upper echelons looked at Gouda in confusion, which made Gouda pull himself together. A demigod beast king isn't something we can come into contact with or deal with. We can only place our hopes on the 5 demigods and Lady Purple from the capital of alternate generations. Now we must focus on the enemy before us. Gouda's calm voice rang in everyone's ears. No matter what, the news of the guardian deity not being in the capital cannot be leaked. Otherwise, if the guardian deity and his army of demonic beasts find out, they will come personally. We will not be able to stop them. The Baruba Empire's higher-ups nodded. Gouda took a deep breath, his eyes cold. Secondly, the traitors in the capital are a huge threat. We must find a way to drag them out. Otherwise, the capital will fall into their hands sooner or later. At this point, Gouda looked at Kaluan, Will, and Jebi. Since the betrayers came from other cities, they're either small fries who can't do anything, or they're members of your 3 clans. The 3 of you will be responsible for finding them. That's right. You must find all of them. Zhang Lixing sneered. That's right. Kaluan, Will, and Jebi's expressions turned serious. The rest of the Baruba Empire's higher-ups were also on edge. Yes. Seeing this, Gouda nodded and turned to look at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still looked at the big picture and sighed. This is a moment of life and death for the Baruba Empire. I hope that everyone can let bygones be bygones and help the Baruba Empire. When Kotori explained the situation of the 5 demigods and the pseudo-demigod Beast King in the Spalier world, she also revealed her own trump card. 5,000 powerhouses that could exhibit strength of the 8th level. This was definitely a great help. With the help of these 5,000 8th level powerhouses, at the very least, there was no possibility of losing in the war against the magical beasts. On top of that, these 6 girls were all Type 9 powerhouses. They were already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. Gouda would have to be out of his mind to think that men were superior to women and force them to give up such a huge help. The rest of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire also thought of this point. They lowered their heads in sullenness. He had thought that they were just a bunch of pretty women. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, these women had turned into existences that even the emperor of the Baruba Empire would have to seek help from? This made the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire, who had just made things difficult for the Baruba Empire, feel awkward and ashamed. They were afraid that the other party would hold a grudge. If they let this huge help slip away right before their eyes, many of them would regret it so much that they wouldn't be able to sleep. It had to be said that the actions of these people did indeed make Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls especially unhappy. However, the girls still knew the severity of the matter. The survival of the Baruba Empire didn't matter, but the pseudo-demigod Beast King was a real threat. If they couldn't delay the other party and let them discover that the pseudo-demigod Beast King was sealed, they would definitely change their target and attack the capital to rescue the pseudo-demigod Beast King. That was what the girls were truly worried about. In order to prevent the capital from being destroyed, the girls would take the initiative to attack and delay the 3 Beast Kings. Thinking of this, the girls nodded. The upper echelons of the Baruba Empire let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1931. Sigh. After leaving the central hall of the Baruba Empire's palace, Toka sighed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. I see Juan, who had been tightly grabbing onto 10 fragrant sleeves and had a pitiful expression as if he had been bullied, spoke with some concern. No one would have thought that he was a 9th-level expert. Miss Toka, are you hungry again? Yes. Yes, I am indeed a little hungry. 10 Fragrance first rubbed her lower abdomen that did not have a trace of excess fat before shaking her head. And I feel a little tired. Tired? Kurumi looked at 10 Incense with a surprised expression. This is really strange. Toka's not exactly a lively person, but she's definitely a cheerful one. Therefore, in the past, when 10 Fragrances was tired, he would only sigh when he was hungry. It was indeed quite strange. Because those people inside are really too annoying. 10 Fragrances wrinkled her little nose. Although I don't know why I feel that they're very annoying, but every time I see their eyes, I feel very annoyed. As expected of Miss Toka, I feel the same. Meijio nodded in agreement. Those men's gazes are really annoying. It's as if they treat people as snacks. They eat and throw them away as they wish. It's really unpleasant. No, I must take a shower when I get back. My skin feels rough after being stared at for so long. Although, I'm not as annoyed as Miss Toka and Meijio, for said shyly. But I don't really like those people. Well, I can understand your feelings. Kotori crossed her arms. The lollipop in her mouth seemed to have melted, leaving only a tube. She held it in her mouth like a toothpick. To be honest, I really want to leave. But even if it's for the otherworldly capital, it's fine. We have to stop the fake Beast King who led the attack on the Baruba Empire's Beast Army. So let's endure for now. Endure? Origami asked without changing his expression. How long should we endure? It's up to you, Kotori replied casually. Anyway, if you can endure it, then endure it. If you can't, then don't endure it. As long as they don't mess with us. Let's take it as though we were on an unpleasant excursion. But if you come knocking on my door, then don't be polite. Don't be so courteous. Is that so? The 4th boneless one looked a little timid. Are you going to fight? Looking at 4th shaman who seemed to be a little scared, except for the new member. Aside from Meijio and the slow-witted Toka, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami, who didn't know much about the 4 Kino's past, all of them came to their senses. The group of girls had almost forgotten that before she met Wu Yin, this doll-like petite girl in front of them was a girl who was so kind-hearted that even if someone wanted to kill her, she wouldn't want them to feel pain from the bottom of her heart. She wouldn't blame anyone, let alone hate anyone. Even if someone wanted to kill Yoshino, Yoshino would not hold a grudge and would even think for this person. Now, if he told Yoshino that if someone came to find him, he should not be polite, Yoshino would probably feel very embarrassed, right? It seems a little difficult for 4 shaman to do all this. Kotori looked at Toka. Toka, I'll leave 4th shaman in your care. No problem. Toka perked up and said confidently, I won't let 4th shaman be bullied. I want to protect the cute 4th shaman too. Meijio immediately came over and hugged her sister-in-law, rubbing against her smooth cheeks. 4th shaman, let me protect you well, from beginning to the end, from the inside out. The group of girls gradually walked away amidst the banter. They did not notice that at this moment, at the entrance of the central hall, 2 pairs of eyes were watching them. It's a middle-aged man in his 40s and a young man in his 20s. If Milena was here, she would definitely recognize this middle-aged man and young man. That middle-aged man is the current head of the Baruba Empire's #1 family, the Moma family, and Milena's teacher, Mans. As for the youth in his 20s, he was Man's son, Kulun's grandson, and the young master of the Morma family, the #1 family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac. The 2 of them stood in the same spot and stared at the group of girls who were fooling around as they walked away. Only when the group of girls had completely disappeared did they withdraw their gazes. A Tier 9 powerhouse. Mans covered his chest that was still in pain from vomiting blood due to the counterpressure of the girl's aura in the hall. A trace of gloom appeared in his eyes. How can a group of young girls reach such a level? As the head of the Moma family, man's strength has reached the bottom line of the heads of the three major families. He's weaker than the ninth shaman in his family, but stronger than the others. He's at the peak of the eighth shaman family. Come to think of it, it's been 10 years since Mans reached the peak of the eighth shaman family. 10 years ago, when Mans had advanced to the peak of the eighth order, Kaluan had given him the position of patriarch. During the 10 years he had been the patriarch, Mans had never slacked off on his cultivation. Even so, for 10 whole years, Mans had not been able to cross the threshold and advance to the ninth order. Hence, when he saw that the young and beautiful girls had all reached the realm that he had always dreamed of, Mans felt a little indignant and helpless. His tone was full of complicated emotions. Don't worry about it. Of course, Mans wasn't the only one who felt complicated. Isaac also looked in the direction the girls left, his eyes filled with uncertainty. They were only at the eighth shaman family when they were in the academy. It hasn't even been half a year since they graduated. From the eighth shaman family to the ninth shaman family in half a year? If they're at the peak of the eighth shaman family, then it's understandable. After all, there's only one step between the peak of the eighth shaman family. This step is so far away that it's despairing. At the very least, Mans hasn't been able to cross it in 10 years. However, if you want to say it's simple, it's also very simple. It's hard to say when you'll cross it. As the young master of the Ma family, the number one family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac was also a student of the Silverio World Institute. He was also the leader of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Baruba Empire. Therefore, he was familiar with a group of girls. In Isaac's opinion, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino were only at the eighth shaman family when they were still studying at the academy. They were far from the peak of the eighth shaman family. It's unbelievable that they could reach the ninth shaman family in half a year. Of course, no matter who it is, it'd be strange if they weren't suspicious when they saw a group of young girls at the peak of the ninth shaman family. Hey, father. Isaac's eyes flickered. That Wu Yin reached the ninth shaman family at a young age. Now, these girls by his side have also reached the ninth shaman family. Say, do you think this capital of a different generation has a method to quickly reach the ninth shaman family? Hearing this, a glint flashed in Man's eyes. Obviously, he had the same idea. When Wu Yin reached Tier 9 in his 20s, he was already considered the youngest Tier 9 in history. Now, there are Tier 9 individuals younger than him popping up one after another. Moreover, they're all close to the youngest Tier 9 in history. It's hard not to be suspicious of him. Mans turned his head and looked at his son. When he saw that his son's eyes were filled with infatuation, greed, dominance, evil, and other possessiveness as he watched the group of girls leave, Mans smiled. Of course, Mans knew what his son's plan was, but he didn't object. In fact, he approved. As long as Isaac succeeds, it'll be a great benefit to both the Moma family and himself. Mans patted Isaac's shoulder. Do what you want. With his father's support, Isaac's eyes immediately lit up and he nodded excitedly. His gaze became sharper as he looked in the direction where the group of young ladies had left. It was like he was looking at something that belonged to him. Chapter 1932. Within the palace of the Baruba Empire's capital, there was a spacious resting area that was specially reserved for guests from the outside. This resting area was to the east of the palace. Not only was the environment beautiful, but it was also surrounded by a verdant bamboo forest. There were also extremely luxurious halls and courtyards. The air was even filled with a fragrance that came from an unknown place. Anyone who smelled it would feel refreshed, and there was no way to find fault with it. This vast resting area was also divided into 3 areas according to the identity, status, and strength of the guests. The first district was provided for those powerhouses or forces with a small reputation. Generally speaking, only those with strength of the 8th order and a certain status would be able to stay here if they came to the palace as a guest. The second district was reserved for those who were at least at the peak of the Type 8 realm and had a background not weaker than the three great clans of the Baruba Empire. Only those with a good reputation would have the qualifications to stay here. For example, the three great clans of the Ailu and Fea empires would stay here when they visited. The third district was the most luxurious place in the palace for VIPs. Those who could live here were either royalty of the Ailu and Fea empires. For example, Kate and Sylph were the most popular princesses in Silveria. They were also the most powerful beings in Silveria. That is a 9th-stage powerhouse. Those who fit these two criteria were few and far between in the Spalier world. In terms of status and power, they were on par with the emperor of the Baruba Empire. They were truly honored guests. Normally, they wouldn't even visit the Baruba Empire's royal palace. Thus, the third section of the resting area was always empty. There were very few people who could stay here. But today, one of the villas in the third section had finally welcomed its own residents. Although it was only temporary, the villa's size was obvious. In terms of size, it was comparable to Guda's palace. Not only did it have a large hall, it also had many bedrooms. There's also a side room that was specially used for training or practicing battle skills or magic. It was well equipped. However, who were these girls? Even though Kotori and Origami were just ordinary kids in the dating battle world, and their houses were also the size of an ordinary family's. Kumi, Toka, and Yoshino were all elves living under a fence. Their living conditions were definitely not as good as this villa. But it wasn't like the girls hadn't stayed in a good place before. Kotori had lived in a luxurious suite in Radatasker's headquarters that was even more luxurious than this villa. Origami had also participated in a special training session with the higher-ups as a member of AST and enjoyed the treatment of the higher-ups. They had stayed in a villa on Dokdo Island. Plus, one of them was the commander of Radatasker, and the other was indifferent. A villa, no matter how luxurious it was, couldn't stir their emotions. Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino had also stayed in a luxurious villa as special students in the Spalier World Academy. Hence, they weren't surprised by this villa. As for Meijio, she was even more surprised. Unlike the other girls, this popular idol singer was a real missy. Her house in the date battle could no longer be described as a villa, but a luxurious mansion. Therefore, nothing special happened when the girls moved into this villa. When the sky turned dark, the girls gathered in the hall on the first floor to discuss the matter of the pseudo-Beast King. Unlike Shokuho Misaki's party, Kotori's party didn't have anyone with Pandora mode like Astria. She didn't have anyone with peak tier 9 strength like Astria. Even with Astria's help, Shokuho Misaki's group still had to resort to poison and ambush to kill the pseudo-Beast King. That's why Kotori's group couldn't do anything to the pseudo-demigod Beast King if they didn't come up with a strategy. However, only Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami participated in the discussion. Meijio wasn't the smart type. She was even a little naive. Yoshino was too pure and kind to participate in the discussion. As for Toka, there was no need to mention Toka. If Meijio isn't the smart type, then Toka isn't the smart type. She's a complete idiot who can't come up with any good ideas. While Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami were discussing the battle strategy, Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino could only sit on the side and kill time. At this time, Meijio was happily teasing Yoshino and Yoshino. She enjoyed Yoshino's cute performance when she panicked, blushed, and her heart raced. She also enjoyed Yoshino's playful and funny performance. After a while, she turned her head and looked at the unhappy Toka. She tilted her head. "Miss Toka, are you still hungry and tired?" "Of course not." Toka pouted. "I'm just thinking about what Shido is doing right now." Toka isn't sure if it's just her imagination, but Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami's discussion seemed to have quieted down when Shido was mentioned. "Brother Shido?" Yoshino blinked her cute eyes. Meijio almost fainted from her cuteness. "Miss Toka, are you thinking about Brother Shido?" It's not that I want to." Shixiang's pretty face turned slightly red as she stammered. "I should say I'm feeling a little lonely, or I miss Shido's cooking." There are various reasons. Hearing Toka's hesitant, embarrassed, weak, and perfunctory words, the group of girls shook their heads and laughed. "Miss Toka, There's no need to worry about my dear. Meiji puffed out her almost invincible chest. Her tone was full of confidence and pride. Even if it's in another world, my dear must be very active. Maybe it's doing something very powerful that we don't know about. When it comes back, my dear will deal with all the demigod and demigod beast kings. I'm sure he's active. On the side, Coterie coldly interjected and told the girls just how much she cared about this topic. Or rather, I'll be surprised if he's willing to settle down. Era. Miss Coterie, you're not telling the truth. Kurumi spread her hands. It was a casual action, but it had an indescribable beauty to it. Miss Coterie, you must be missing your brother, right? Who's missing him? Coterie raised an eyebrow and curled her lips in disdain. I hope he doesn't return. Before Coterie could finish her words, the surrounding girls all cast curious and mocking gazes at her. Coterie's disdainful expression froze, and she couldn't continue her sentence. Instead, she revealed an angry expression. Why are you looking at me like that? Shido said. Origami's voice was emotionless as usual, but the content of her words almost made Coterie explode. You're acting like it's Sundara. You're that Sundara. Coterie was going crazy. Your whole family is Sundara. All right, Miss Coterie is going to get angry if we keep talking. It's getting late. Let's get some rest. Kurumi stretched and yawned cutely. We won't be able to come to a conclusion today. Let's continue tomorrow. Coterie snorted but didn't object. The other girls nodded as well. Just as the group of young ladies were about to return to their respective rooms to rest, a series of knocks suddenly sounded at the door. The girls were surprised at first, then they looked at each other. They don't know anyone in the Baruba Empire's palace. Some of them are even on bad terms. Who would come looking for them in the middle of the night? I'll go open the door. With such doubts in mind, Coterie stepped forward and opened the door. The figure standing before the door stunned Coterie and the group of young ladies. It's a young man they don't know. Judging from the luxurious decorations he's wearing, he doesn't seem like a normal person. The girls thought he was a servant. The person who came was precisely Isaac. Chapter 1933. Standing at the entrance of the villa, Isaac looked at Coterie, Kurumi, Toa, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino, who were looking at him with surprise. Although he had a smile on his face, his heart was burning with passion. He couldn't help it. The group of girls in front of him had the best looks that Isaac had ever seen in his life. He couldn't help but be tempted. Let's not talk about Toa for now. This girl who was looking at him with a surprised expression had a dreamy appearance that others would only see in their dreams. Her long purple hair that naturally hung down to her shoulders and waist was tied into a ponytail that burst out like water under the binding of a bow-knot-like hairband. Her clear eyes reflected an indescribable and inconceivable color. That appearance that even a goddess would be jealous of was enough to snatch away a person's sight, attention, and even heart in an instant, revealing an extraordinary beauty. Who wouldn't be tempted by such an unbelievably beautiful girl? Even if there were no other factors causing trouble, Isaac was certain that if he had the chance to get close to her, it would be worth it no matter what price he had to pay. Standing closest to Toa was Origami. When Isaac first laid his eyes on this slender girl, he felt that she was very special. Her short white hair, which could almost touch her shoulders, was soft and cold. She was like a doll, just like an artifact that had been measured. Her upright and pretty face had an exquisiteness that was not inferior to 10 fragrances. Although there was almost nothing called expression on her face compared to the former, the latter's coldness was also extremely attractive, especially to Isaac. After all, as a former student of the Spalier World Academy, Isaac had seen SYLPH's cold beauty up close more than once. She was the idol of the entire academy, and her cold elegance could captivate the hearts of all students. It was impossible for Isaac to not be tempted by a girl like SYLPH, who had extraordinary talent and a strong background. Unfortunately, SYLPH didn't seem to be tempted at all. Isaac, who had been itching to pursue her, couldn't find a single flaw. Now, Isaac saw Origami's cold and elegant beauty that was similar to SYLPH's. How could he not be excited when he saw Origami, who once harbored evil intentions towards Sylph. Compared to Toa and Origami, Meijio didn't have an outstanding temperament, but her appearance was slightly more mature. Her dignified and beautiful face was extremely alluring. However, what was even more alluring was Meijio's flawless body that no one could find fault with. It could even be said that no one could compare to her body. If one could embrace that body, what kind of softness would that lucky man be filled with? It was a fatal temptation that made one's breath quicken. Of course, even though Meijio's appearance and figure were top-notch, what really intoxicated Isaac was her voice. Her voice was the voice of a true angel. Ever since this girl appeared in front of Isaac in the central hall of the palace, she had only said one sentence that was extremely insulting to men. However, when she said that sentence, her voice was like poison, and Isaac was completely addicted to it. Isaac could even imagine that if she used this voice to moan with a man, it would definitely be an unparalleled pleasure for the man. Toka, Origami, and Meijio. The three different girls all had the capital to make men unable to stop. If it wasn't for the fact that the three girls also had the terrifying strength that made no one dare to take half a step into the lightning pool, Isaac wouldn't have been stingy with using some despicable means to take the three girls into his pocket. Isaac believed that even if there were women in the world who could be compared to Toka, Origami, and Meijio, he wouldn't be able to find anyone who could surpass them in terms of attractiveness. However, Isaac now realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. There were women who were more attractive to Isaac than the three of them. It was that girl who stood in a dark corner and seemed to have all the light in the world focused on her. Her beauty was breathtaking. It was a beauty that could make one's body tremble. Her jet-black waist-length hair was tied into two bundles, hanging obediently in front of her body. Her skin was as white as a pearl, and the slight exposed part of her neck gave people the feeling that it would break with just a little bit of force. The young lady's bangs covered more than half of her astonishingly beautiful face, and even one of her eyes was covered. However, Isaac couldn't help but thank the girl for covering one of his eyes, because Isaac was actually a little scared. He was scared that the girl's eyes had a charm that was even more alluring than the girl's beautiful appearance. Isaac felt that as long as he saw the girl's covered eyes, he would completely fall at her feet. He would no longer be able to struggle free from her breathtaking beauty. Of course, if it was just in terms of appearance, Kurumi was only on the same level as Toka, Origami, and Meijio. What made Isaac almost lose himself in Kurumi's attractiveness was her temperament. It was as sweet as an angel's and as dangerous as a demon's. It just so happened that Isaac was infatuated with this contradictory, yet challenging temperament. Thus, he fell for Kurumi's attractiveness. As for Kotori and Yono, although they were still a little immature in some areas, one was as beautiful as a work of art, and the other was as cute as a doll. When they grow up, they wouldn't be inferior to the other four girls. The rare beauties in the past were now standing within his reach. He only had to stretch out his hand, and he would be able to touch them. Each of them was comparable to Sylph, whom he once admired. The fire in Isaac's heart was unimaginable. Even if it was any other man, as long as he had a normal sexual orientation and aesthetic standards, he wouldn't be able to avoid the same reaction. Moreover, these girls were all far more talented and powerful than Sylph, who dominated the Spalier World Academy for many years. Isaac's eyes almost turned red when he thought about how he could win their hearts. 6-tier, 9 powerhouses. That's already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. After all, even the Baruba Empire only had Gida, Kluin, Will, and Goodbye on the surface, wasn't it? Moreover, the other party might have a way to quickly reach the Tier 9 realm. As long as he could obtain the hearts of these girls, not only would Isaac be able to possess 6 extremely beautiful girls with extremely powerful battle prowess, he would also be able to raise the status of the Ma family to a level that would surpass that of the royal family. He would also be able to make his position in the family unbreakable. He would also be able to obtain the opportunity to advance to the 9th level. No matter how one looked at it, it was an extremely great temptation. Once he thought of the various benefits, and then took in the group of young ladies before him with their extremely beautiful looks and otherworldly temperaments. Isaac secretly swore in his heart that even if he had to pay a price for himself, he would still successfully take these young ladies into his pocket. Isaac had great confidence in his looks, temperament, achievements, and so on. He was the young clan leader of the Ma clan, the #1 clan in the Baruba Empire. Furthermore, he possessed the outstanding talent and strength to advance to the peak of rank 7 at the age of 20. Over the years, there were countless talented young ladies who had been toyed with by Isaac. That's why Isaac never thought he would hit a wall. She wondered if Isaac had thought of this before. In terms of background, status, would these girls care about Isaac's background, status, and status when they even dare to take care of Gada? In terms of strength, Isaac couldn't even compare to a single finger of these girls. In terms of talent, he was only at the peak of the Tier 7 realm at the age of 20. Compared to himself, who reached the Tier 9 realm before the age of 20, how bad was his talent? In terms of achievements, Isaac couldn't even enter the eyes of these girls. In terms of looks and temperament, were these girls shallow women who would be moved by these things? The answer was no. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that these girls already had someone they couldn't shake in their hearts. This pitiful man who was greedy to the point of wanting to swallow an elephant and never thought about whether he was worthy or not was destined to meet a tragedy. R1152. Chapter 1934. Isaac didn't even consider that a true 9-stage powerhouse, even if he really lowered his status to take a look at him, could he afford to offend him? True powerhouses had strong self-esteem. Even if they didn't mind that their other half was weaker than them and had a lower status than them, they still had to know their own limits. Since they wanted to pursue an existence that was originally unattainable, then the only right way was to devote themselves to it, right? Isaac, on the other hand, was so greedy that he wanted to win the hearts of 6 girls who were at the top of the Spalier world in terms of appearance, temperament, strength, background, status, and so on. Isn't this the same as a snake trying to swallow an elephant? Of course, this was also the Baruba Empire's patriarchal mindset. In the hearts of the Baruba Empire's men, the status of women was lower than their own. Having multiple wives and concubines was nothing to them. They would never consider whether or not their other half would mind if they were fickle in love. This kind of situation was even more obvious when the person he was pursuing was someone he couldn't even hope to reach. Isaac was confident that he could win the hearts of these girls, but he didn't know that he was already out of the game when he tried to woo 6 girls who were more outstanding than him. On the other hand, the girls didn't know that they were being targeted by someone with bad intentions. Coterie was still in the middle of opening the door. She glanced at the luxurious clothes on him. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. Isaac had a handsome smile on his face, but his eyes were fixed on her. She raised an eyebrow. "You are?" Miss Coterie sure is forgetful. Isaac didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, he spoke in a friendly tone. "You remember Melina, but you don't remember me?" Coterie knitted her brows. Then, she seemed to recall something and nodded in realization. "I remember now. You're the leader of the Emerald Tower, one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier world, right?" The Emerald Tower is the representative faction of the Mama family in the Spalier world. Isaac and Melina were both members of the Emerald Tower. The difference is, as the young master of the Mama family, Isaac is the leader of the Emerald Tower. On the other hand, Melina, who is stronger and more talented than Isaac, is only a member of the Emerald Tower. Coterie listened to Fei's explanation of each of the 12 strongest factions in Silveria World Institute more than once. After hearing about Isaac and Melina's situation, Coterie was shocked. She even asked about the details with a heart full of doubts. That was only natural, just like the Deadly Forest. Lulu is the only daughter of the Lori family headlar. However, he wasn't the leader of the Deadly Forest. Fei, on the other hand, was only Lar's disciple. This proved that the 12 strongest factions don't necessarily need a direct descendant of the family to be the leader. Therefore, although Isaac was the young patriarch of the Moma family, in terms of excellence, Milena was still more outstanding. Milena even occupied one of the top 10 rankings, while Isaac was ranked after the top 10. This also proved that Milena was the more outstanding side. Logically speaking, Milena should be the leader, not Isaac, right? Originally, Coterie had thought that Isaac was outstanding in some areas other than his strength, such as strategy and foresight, which was why he became the leader. That wasn't surprising at all. However, Fei refuted her on the spot. Compared to Milena, Isaac can't compare to her in anything other than his status. The only reason he's the leader is because of his status and the fact that the Baruba Empire doesn't value women. After knowing this, Coterie no longer paid attention to this man who became the leader because he was the young patriarch of the Emerald Tower. Instead, she had some impression of Milena, who had the strongest combat strength in the Emerald Tower. This was the reason. If Isaac hadn't mentioned it himself, and Coterie had met Isaac a few times in the past, she wouldn't have remembered this man who talked to himself. It's a good thing that Ms. Coterie still remembers me. Otherwise, I'd really wonder if my presence is a little weak. Isaac had no idea that Coterie already had the impression that his status was his only merit. He laughed as if they were close friends. Ever since you ladies graduated from the academy, I thought I'd never have the chance to meet you ladies again. I didn't expect you ladies to visit my country today. I'm really happy. However, it wasn't appropriate for me to show my face in front of His Majesty, so I only came to greet you now. I hope you don't think I'm the one who neglected you. Even someone as astute as Coterie couldn't help but be taken aback by Isaac's polite and friendly words. She couldn't help but mutter inwardly, "Don't tell me all the students from the Spalier World Academy are so friendly to their former classmates? You're being too courteous." Coterie replied in a neutral tone. "Well then, Mr. Isaac, is there anything you need from us?" "Yes." "Well, if you want to talk about something, there is indeed something." Isaac scratched his head as if he was embarrassed. "Actually, I'm here to apologize." "Apologize?" Coterie and the other girls were stunned. "I'm really sorry." Isaac's expression turned serious. "Today, the Baruba Empire did something impolite to all of you because of a small matter. At that time, due to my position, I had no choice but to follow suit. Ever since then, I've felt very bad about it. That's why I've come to apologize. Please forgive my rudeness." When Isaac said this, not only was his expression very serious, but his tone was also very sincere. Although Isaac didn't think that it was rude of him to make a move at that time, it was true that he had come to apologize. He didn't want to leave a bad impression in the hearts of the girls because of some small matter, so he wanted to redeem himself with an apology. In other words, the apology was just a means to achieve his goal. And there's a follow-up to this. Without waiting for the group of girls to speak, Isaac hurriedly spoke. "To express my apologies, why don't I be the guest and treat all of you to a meal? You ladies haven't eaten yet, right? Treat?" Even though Coterie, Kurumi, Meijio, and Origami didn't realize Isaac's true intention, they all furrowed their brows. Even the glutton Toka and the docile Yoshino had the same reaction. There's no other reason. It's just that the girls don't want to eat with strange men when Wu Yin isn't around. At that moment, the Origami head spoke in an extremely calm tone. "I'm not going." Origami did not explain why or reject the request. After expressing her attitude in an unusually concise manner, she did not say another word. Isaac, who thought that the girls had no reason to reject the request, was stunned. "I'm not going either." Miyuki maintained her frown and waved her hand in disgust. "I hate being too close to men." This unreasonable statement made the stunned Isaac's expression change. "I'm not going either." Yoshino spoke in a timid but firm tone. "If it's just a meal, I want to eat here." Toka hesitated between eating and not eating. In the end, she didn't want to get too close to a strange man because of a meal. She shook her head reluctantly. "I'm not going either." "Allah." Kurumi gently caressed his cheek and tilted her head. The flirtatious expression she displayed at that moment made Isaac's heart tremble. However, the words she said made Isaac's heart sink. I also don't want to eat with a man other than Owner Sama. Owner Sama? Isaac's heart sank to the bottom because of Kurumi's title. Could it be that this beauty already has a master? At the thought of this possibility, not only did Isaac's heart sink to the bottom of the valley, even the look in his eyes turned ferocious in an instant. One had to know that among the group of girls, the one who attracted Isaac the most was Kurumi. However, Isaac did not notice that the trace of savagery in his eyes had finally torn apart his disguise. A cold glint flashed in Kotori's eyes as she observed him. She sneered inwardly. Looks like my sisters don't want to go out. Kotori smiled. However, we'll accept your apology. Thank you for your kind intentions, sir. Isaac's face finally darkened. Chapter 1935. Before coming to visit the young ladies, Isaac had made a lot of preparations. He had come up with many countermeasures for various situations in an attempt to gain the favor of the young ladies. WX. It had to be said that although Isaac was a little greedy and self-righteous, he did have some skills when it came to wooing girls. It wasn't hard to see how many girls he had harmed. He didn't think that he would be able to win over his target in one fell swoop. He was just trying to gain a little bit of favor for his future plans. Therefore, before coming, Isaac had also thought about the various reactions the girls would have to his visit and had made preparations to deal with it. However, Isaac had thought that the group of girls would put on airs and treat him with contempt or indifference. He also thought that the group of girls would be disgusted with him because of what happened during the day. He also thought that the group of girls would vent their anger on him for the treatment they received during the day. However, he didn't think that things would develop like this. Isaac believed that the reason he found for treating them was not stiff or unreasonable at all. He also believed that there was a high chance that he would be rejected. Therefore, in response to the possible answers the group of girls might give, Isaac had also come up with a set of words to convince them. As long as he brought out these words, whether it was because of their pride or because they used to be in the same school, the group of girls would have no choice but to reluctantly agree. As long as they agreed, Isaac had hundreds of ways to make the group of girls see him in a different light, or at least leave some impression and influence. But now, what was the reason that Isaac heard? Not going? What kind of reason was this? She hated being too close to men? This was indeed a reason, but what could Isaac use to convince the other party? Eat here? Wouldn't all of Isaac's previous arrangements be ruined? This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was the reason that Kurumi gave. She didn't want to eat with any man other than her husband. Isaac was absolutely certain that he had heard the words, Lord Husband. What did this mean? It meant that the woman he liked was already taken and was even married. Isaac had indeed used his own methods to deceive many young ladies. But as a person of the empire where men were superior to women, men who cared about their status would never ruin their own reputation for a married woman. Therefore, even though Isaac had been a playboy for many years, he had never had the thought of having a relationship with a married woman, let alone pursuing a married woman openly. If Kurumi was really married to another man, Isaac could directly declare that he had failed. How could Isaac, who was full of confidence before, not go crazy with anger? Especially when he saw Kurumi tilted her head. Isaac's heart became boiling hot as he looked at her charming and seductive appearance while she gently caressed her cheeks. He roared crazily in his heart. Impossible. She's mine. Mine. Unaware that he had been seen through by Kotori, Isaac tried his best to suppress his emotions and put on a smile. But this smile was different from before. It was already a little difficult. Kurumi is already married? Isaac's tone was like stop joking as he tried to cover it up. Kurumi, you really like to joke around. She just graduated not long ago. How could she get married so quickly? This was the only excuse Isaac could come up with to comfort himself. Although Spalier World Academy didn't forbid students from getting married, Spalier World Academy gathered the best cultivation resources in the three empires. Everyone who entered the academy wanted to fight for more resources to cultivate, who would be in the mood to get married. Of course, there were quite a few who were engaged or privately committed to marriage, but the students would still prioritize increasing their own strength. it wouldn't be too late to wait until they graduated before getting married. Thus, there really hadn't been a married student in the academy. Kurumi graduated not long ago. Even if she wanted to get married, she would have to spend a lot of time just to choose a good date. It was a bit of a stretch for her to get married. Although it was a self-comforting reason, Isaac's reason was still reasonable and well-founded. Unfortunately, when she heard Isaac's words, Kwang San smiled sweetly. Her smile was so big that her eyes curved into crescent moons. Although we're not officially married yet, everything I have has been taken away by him. Isaac's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Ah! Kurumi held her cheeks and made a bashful expression. Her beautiful face was flushed red. Even now, I still remember those few nights. My husband put me in an embarrassing position, took off my clothes, and licked every part of my body. He even investigated me carefully. Especially that night, my husband was really bad. He didn't give me a chance to speak and impatiently pushed me down. He even used that big thing to penetrate my body. It was really hot. So hot. Such an explicit description was like a huge hammer that hammered into Isaac's heart. Isaac's face turned green, white, red, and black. It was simply wonderful. Kurumi. Ten Fragrance was also embarrassed by Kurumi's words. Her entire face turned red, and she shouted with shame and indignation. Dude, what nonsense are you talking about? That's right. That's right. Mei Jio pouted angrily. Just when Isaac thought that Mei Jio was going to reprimand him, Mei Jio angrily said such a sentence. I'm so envious. No, I also want to spend a hot night with my darling. Isaac's eyes widened to their widest extent. Could it be that this beautiful girl with a heavenly voice was also taken like Kwang San? And it was the same person? Wah wah, for cried out shyly. Miss Kwa, Miss Mei Jio, please don't say any more. Era. Kurumi giggled as she moved her face closer to Yoshino's face. Don't tell me Fourth Fragrance doesn't want to spend a hot night with husband? A hot... With a bang, Fourth Bonnie's face turned completely red. She tightly grabbed her hat and covered her head. She no longer dared to show her face to anyone. Seeing this, Isaac's pupils dilated again. Even this person, Kurumi. Ten Fragrance shouted angrily. Her face was still red. Don't say strange things again. That's a pity. Kurumi smiled happily. I wanted husband to dote on Miss Ten Fragrance, but I didn't expect Miss Ten Fragrance to hate husband so much. I don't hate Sherdao. Ten Incense immediately jumped up and shouted without hesitation. I like Sherdao the most. I can't pretend I didn't hear you. Origami couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Her expressionless face turned hostile as she looked at Ten Fragrance. I'm definitely the one who likes Sherdao the most. There's more. Origami turned her hostile gaze to Kurumi. Although I didn't spend a good night with Sherdao, I licked his entire body. Kurumi and Mijiu were shocked. Toka and Yoshino's faces turned red. On the other hand, Isaac's body trembled again and again. Every word from the girls was like a fatal blow, hitting him so hard that he staggered back, his face turning green. Kurumi, Ten Fragrance, Meijio, Origami, and Four Fragrance. These girls are the best in the world in terms of strength, background, status, appearance, and temperament. They're all taken, and they're all the same person? Well, it's just as you thought. Looking at Isaac's green face, Kodari smirked maliciously and delivered the final blow. By the way, I'm also in love with that person. Not only is he our future husband, he's also the fiancé of Ailu Empire's genius princess, Sylph. Sylph's fiancé? It's him, Wu Yan. Isaac's body began to tremble violently, as if he was suffering from epilepsy. The green color on his face had completely turned red. Immediately, Isaac spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't take the blow and fell to the ground, unconscious. Chapter 1936. Looking at Isaac, who had completely fainted after spitting out a mouthful of blood and falling to the ground, the group of girls were all dumbfounded. This, Tin Fragrance, Meijio, and Siyunai, who did not understand what was going on, were completely at a loss. What the hell is going on? Unlike Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino, who didn't understand what was going on, Origami frowned slightly and understood what was going on. Kurumi blinked her eyes, and the shy expression on her face had completely disappeared. It was replaced with a disappointed expression. Kotori also understood what happened. Unlike Isaac, Kurumi had already guessed Isaac's intention from the very beginning. She had already guessed Isaac's purpose for coming to find them, but that's not surprising. Back in the date battle world, before she met Wu Yin, Kurumi relied on her charm to attract a lot of boys who wanted to hit on her. She lured them to a secluded place and absorbed their time. She used them as a resource to activate her angel. That's why Kurumi was very sensitive to men who wanted to do something to her. It wasn't strange for her to see through Isaac's intentions. That's why she said a series of explicit words to provoke Isaac. Poor Isaac. This time, he really took a huge tumble. Perhaps some people would think that Isaac couldn't take the provocation and vomited blood because a bunch of women he just met today had a man of his own. But if you think about it carefully, it's not an exaggeration at all. Indeed, Isaac had once relied on his own methods to move unhindered among the flowers, toying with countless delicate girls in the palm of his hand. However, that was just the man's possessiveness causing mischief. All of them were just for fun, and there was not a single time where he was serious. That's why instead of saying that Isaac was dominating a field of flowers, it was more accurate to say that he was capable of dominating a field of flowers. On the other hand, Isaac, who had been fooling around all this while, was attracted to Sylph after meeting her in Silverio World Institute. Not only did she manage to reach the 8th Order before the age of 20, she also dominated the entire Silverio World Institute for a few years. She was the princess who was crowned as the strongest student in the academy. She was simply too outstanding. Her appearance alone was the most beautiful Isaac had ever seen in his life. Her cold aura that came from her bones touched the hearts of all the men and women in the Spalier World Academy, including Isaac. On the day he met Sylph, Isaac admitted that it was the first time he was moved by a woman. Plus, Sylph was the daughter of the Ailu Empire's Emperor Kite. Her status was higher than Isaac's. With his possessiveness, how could he not pursue Sylph? It was a pity that Sylph's coldness was genuine. Even though it was fatally attractive to men, it wasn't something they could take advantage of. In the end, Isaac didn't even have the chance to talk to Sylph, even though both of them were in the same academy and were the leaders of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier World Academy. This made Isaac, who thought he was invincible when it came to chasing after women, felt defeated. Fortunately, Isaac wasn't the only one who got snubbed like this. Sylph wasn't the only one who treated Isaac the same way. Even when she spoke to Jaffer and Kaya, she was cold and emotionless. This made Isaac feel a lot better. However, one day, Isaac received a piece of news while he was dreaming about having Sylph by his side. Sylph was engaged. She was engaged to a newbie who enrolled in the Spalier World Academy less than 3 months ago. Wu Yan. This newbie, who only enrolled in the Spalier World Academy for less than 3 months, managed to make it to the top 5 in the rankings. Even Prince Jaffer of the Baruba Empire could only fight him to a draw. This newbie had done what Isaac couldn't even do after exhausting all his efforts over the past few years. The day he got the news, Isaac smashed everything he could find in the Emerald Tower. He even vented his anger on a few members of the Emerald Tower, who came to check out the situation by kicking them out of the Emerald Tower. He hated Wu Yin to the core. However, this newbie, who had no background, no status, not only did he steal Sylph from Isaac, but he also easily defeated Jaffer and Kaya, becoming the strongest student in history. Isaac didn't have the guts to seek revenge. Not to mention, this newbie was the fiancé of the Ailu Empire's royal princess. Isaac didn't dare to offend this newbie, so he could only swallow his grievances. Under such circumstances, Isaac found out that all the girls who could compete with Sylph, or even surpass her, had become Wu Yan's women. It's easy to imagine how much of a shock Isaac felt. On top of that, Kurumi used such a blatant method to tell Isaac what kind of relationship the woman he wanted had with the man he hated the most. Isaac only coughed up blood and didn't die. That's already a testament to his mental fortitude. So, as I said from the beginning, this Isaac is a tragedy. Kurumi. Kotori rolled her eyes when she realized Kurumi was trying to provoke Isaac. You're really bad to the core. Tara. Kurumi smiled knowingly. Pity? No. Kotori's pretty face flashed a sinister smile. Very good. In just a few words, Kotori and Kurumi's impression of Isaac was on the verge of being revealed. This made Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino very confused. Only Origami glanced at Isaac, who was lying on the ground and vomiting blood and fainted, and said without any ripples, "What should we do with this person?" Well, Kotori turned around and walked inside without looking back. You could decide for yourselves. Hearing this, the group of girls looked at each other. In the end, they all chose to turn around silently. Meijio even closed the door, leaving Isaac, who had fainted and vomited blood, lying on the cold ground alone. His figure was abnormally sad. So what if he's surrounded by a field of flowers? In the end, he couldn't get what he wanted the most. That's the most tragic part. While all kinds of disputes were going on in the royal palace of the Baruba Empire, an unknown scene was playing out in a desolate city about 8,000 meters away. It was a scene playing out in a courtyard at the center of the city. There were two figures, one standing and one kneeling. The standing figure had his back to the kneeling figure. The kneeling figure seemed to be saying something, causing the standing figure's eyes to light up. It wasn't until the kneeling figure finished speaking that the standing figure turned around and looked at the person kneeling in front of him. He let out a thunderous voice filled with oppression. "Is what you said true?" "I wouldn't dare lie," the kneeling figure said in fear. "This humble one is telling the truth." "Very good." The figure standing there grinned. It seemed like he was smiling, but it was a sneer. The Baruba Empire's guardian isn't in the capital. Even the heavens are protecting us beast men. With such a short sentence, the identity of this person became clear. He claimed to be a beast man, a demonic beast. Magical beasts, on the other hand, would only shed their beastly body and transform into human form after advancing to the demigod level. In that case, the identity of this person was obvious. He was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire. Since this person was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire, the identity of the kneeling figure was obvious. A traitor. Through some unknown means, he found out that the Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the capital and leaked the information to the Beast King. Now, the Baruba Empire is in real danger. That traitor is a traitor. The figure standing there disappeared without a sound. Tomorrow, I will personally annihilate the Baruba Empire's imperial city. Such a sentence disappeared along with the sound of the wind, making the storm in the desert seem even more violent. It was like a warning of tomorrow's bloody storm. R1152. Chapter 1937. The next day, when the scorching sunlight poured down and once again visited the monotonous desert with only one color, the chilliness of the night almost instantly disappeared without a trace. All the heat that belonged to the desert filled the entire desert, causing the air to slightly distort. If someone were to walk in this desert, their vision would be distorted as well. The Baruba Empire's capital city, located between the two towering mountains, welcomed new guards. They replaced the guards who had been guarding the city for an entire night. The guard in charge of the shift was a middle-aged warrior in his 30s or 40s. He was clad in sturdy armor. As soon as he led the guards to the top of the city walls, the middle-aged warrior called out to a bare-chested, burly man who seemed to be in charge of the guards. "Hey, buddy, it's time to change shifts. You're here?" The burly man withdrew his gaze from the distance and looked at the middle-aged warrior. There was a trace of dissatisfaction on his face. "You're half an hour late today." "Well, it's only half an hour. I'm not sleeping in." The middle-aged warrior waved his hand casually. "I could have made it in time." Who knew there would be some strange rumors in the city this morning? I was intrigued. By the time I snapped out of it, I was already late. Strange rumors? The burly man asked curiously. What rumors? Rumor? There are two rumors. The middle-aged warrior didn't try to hide it. He held up two fingers. First, it is said that when the palace servants were patrolling, they accidentally overheard some of the higher-ups saying that the little girls who entered the palace yesterday seemed to have tripped them up and injured all the higher-ups in front of His Majesty. Bah! The burly man spat out a mouthful of saliva with a face full of disdain and said contemptuously, "A group of girls injured all the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire? You believe that? Rumor. That's why I said it was a rumor." The middle-aged warrior huffed. That group of lasses should be the lass who boarded that strangely shaped airship into the city yesterday and appeared at the floating plaza with a large group of scantily clad women. Right? That's right. That's right. The brawny man nodded. I was also at the floating plaza at that time, so I saw it very clearly. Those scantily clad women are really strange. The middle-aged warrior frowned. It's not like our Baruba Empire doesn't have bolder and more flamboyant outfits, but it seems like they've been staying in the city since yesterday. I heard that there's even an area in the city that's been set aside for them. Why? It's indeed a little strange. It's just a group of women who haven't even reached adulthood yet. Why would they specially empty an area for them to live in? Couldn't he just make some arrangements? Was there something special about them? The burly man pondered for a moment before speaking. What's the second rumor? The second rumor is a bit like that, the middle-aged warrior said sneakily. I heard that this morning there were servants in the palace who found an unconscious man lying in a pool of blood in the resting area provided for distinguished guests. Moreover, that man seems to be the young patriarch of the Emoma family. You mean that Isaac? The brawny man said in surprise. Why would he be in the resting area and lying unconscious in a pool of blood? Who knows? The middle-aged warrior gloated. I heard that the young patriarch often flirts with women. Perhaps he took a fancy to one of them and went to flirt with her at night. In the end, he ran into a nail and was taught a lesson. This time, the brawny man believed him. That's true. The resting area of the palace is basically filled with people with great backgrounds. This Isaac must have offended some royal family member and was left there for an entire night. Because I was interested in this, I ended up arguing with someone in the city and forgot about the time. The middle-aged warrior chuckled. It's not too late. Let's change shifts now. All right. The brawny man jumped down from his high vantage point and shouted at the guards who were still on alert. Change shifts. Everyone returned to the city to rest. Yes. Only then did the guards relax. One by one, they twisted their stiff bodies and rushed back to the city noisily. Amidst the noise, most of the conversations were like this. Sigh, I don't know when these days of waking up to guard the city and going to sleep after guarding the city will end. I hope His Majesty and the others can quickly find a way to deal with the magical beasts and set us free. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. I've already decided. After repelling the magical beasts, I'll rush back to my hometown and get married. Go back to your hometown and get married? That's right. Even though she's the girl my parents picked for me, I heard that she's gentle and virtuous. She's very lively. My wife has been pregnant for almost 10 months. I reckon she'll give birth after repelling the magical beasts. I've also decided, after the war with the magical beasts, I'll retire and stop cultivating. I'll just live an ordinary life. If Wu Yin was present and heard the conversation of the guards, he would definitely fall off the city wall. Go back to his hometown and get married? His child is about to be born? Retire and stop cultivating? F***CK. These are all death flags. If they raise death flags now, even if the guards aren't the ones who will die, they'll still die, right? Could these pitiful defenders really survive the war between the humans and the magical beasts? Facts have proven that even in the Spalier world, death flags are heaven-defying. Rumble. When the city guards who had been guarding the city wall for a whole night were about to walk off the city wall, a series of tremors and quakes gradually came into effect, causing their footsteps and faces to freeze at the same time. Roar, roar, roar. The air that was distorted by the scorching sunlight had turned into waves of air amidst the familiar roars. It swept across the desert like tornadoes, rolling up yellow sand and gradually filling the air with a sandstorm. On the horizon far away from the royal city of the Baruba Empire, the desert became chaotic. Sand, dust, and smoke rolled up like a dense fog. Listening to the roars in the air, feeling the vibrations in the air and the ground, and looking at the dust and smoke in the distance in front of Royal City, the city guards finally thought of something and looked at the horizon in front of the city. Then, the expressions of the city guards changed. He saw a large group of densely packed magical beasts that were charging over like mad bulls. They were roaring as they struggled to move their limbs that were constantly sinking into the yellow sand. They were charging over in a frenzy. That was not all. In the sky, a swarm of flying magical beasts that looked like locusts were also braving the heavy sandstorm and storm to stabilize their bodies, flying over amidst their inherent roars. From the looks of it, these flying magical beasts would probably reach the skies above the capital in another 10 minutes. Thus, the city guards are in an uproar. The magical beasts are attacking. The middle-aged warrior and the burly man finally reacted and yelled in unison. Don't panic. Get into formation. Prepare to defend the city. Hearing that, the city guards calmed down and immediately formed rows of troops, spreading out on the city walls. The warriors raised the bows in their hands, while the spellcasters gripped their magic staffs tightly. They were fully focused, preparing to face the magical beast army head-on. It wasn't as if the Baruba Empire hadn't been attacked by the magical beast army over the past few days. The Baruba Empire had taken advantage of the terrain and the boundaries to fight against the magical beasts, forcing them to retreat. Therefore, after the initial panic, the city guards had completely calmed down and were prepared to carry out the impregnable defense as usual, repelling the attacking magical beasts once again. If the magical beasts continued to attack as usual, then, with all kinds of disadvantages, they would return empty-handed in the end. However, today was destined to break the deadlock. Swoosh! Before the magical beast army reached the attack range of the city defenders, a loud sound of something tearing through the air attracted the attention of all the city defenders. When the city guards saw the source of the sound, they were all dumbfounded. Our 1152. Chapter 1938. Whoosh! With a piercing sound, a black shadow broke through the clouds of flying magical beasts with the speed of a meteor, stopping in the air above the Baruba Empire's capital. Just like that, it floated there looking down. The black shadow was, in fact, a human silhouette. It was because of this human silhouette floating in the air, looking down at the Baruba Empire's capital, that the city guards were stunned. In the Spalier world, there were only two kinds of people who could fly. The first kind were warriors and magicians who trained in magic that allowed them to float or fly. The other kind were those who broke through the barrier of the 9th rank and reached the demigod rank. Apart from these two types of existences, other people would have to rely on tools, miraculous medicines, special armaments, and other external objects such as airships. Otherwise, they would only be able to achieve similar feats. For example, powerhouses of the 8th and 9th order could rely on micromanipulation of their do-chi and mana to allow themselves to hover in the air, achieving a feat similar to flying or hovering. However, in the end, it was only similar, and there was no way to maintain it for a long time, nor could it be used flexibly. It would even consume a large amount of do-chi and mana. Therefore, in the Spalier world, the only ones who could truly float or fly were those who had cultivated techniques or spells with such effects, or were demigod-level powerhouses. Now, seeing a person hovering in the air so stably, the guards who were at least rank 7 could be sure that he was truly hovering and flying and not using any similar means. Therefore, the person hovering in the air was either a demigod or a demigod, who had practiced some sort of technique or magic that had the effect of hovering or flying. The city guards hoped that it was the former and not the latter, because the other party had just brazenly flown out of a large swarm of flying magical beasts like a swarm of locusts. Since the flying magical beasts didn't attack him, and even let him pass, it meant that he wasn't on their side. He was an enemy, and if this enemy was a demigod-rank powerhouse, then the city guards could be certain. Today, the Baruba Empire's capital would definitely face an unprecedented crisis. Unfortunately, while the city guards were still staring at the sky in a daze, Lin Fan's expression changed drastically. The figure floating in the air mercilessly extinguished the hope in their hearts. The figure floating in the air raised one of his hands, and a black radiance that looked like a corrosive gas surged out and gradually condensed. Without even saying a word, the figure floating in the air threw down his hand as if he was throwing something. The corrosive gas, like black radiance, immediately shot down from the sky like a waterfall. Whoosh! The black waterfall rubbed against the air like a meteorite that broke through the atmosphere. Not long after, it landed on the rippling barrier around the Baruba Empire's capital. Boom! Following a thunderous sound, a violent shockwave swept out from where the black waterfall landed, spreading in all directions. Punk! The barrier of the Baruba Empire that could withstand the attacks of hundreds of Type 8 powerhouses could not even hold out for a second, as it shattered with a loud crack. Following that, the black waterfall continued to descend on the Baruba Empire's capital without slowing down. Punk! Like an atomic explosion, the Baruba Empire's capital was engulfed in a violent shockwave and a thick cloud of dust. Screams and cries of panic rang out from within the capital. When the shockwave and dust dissipated, the Baruba Empire's capital was once again exposed to the sunlight. However, at that very moment, the city that was said to be the most sturdy and fortress-like had undergone a great change. The walls that were covered with spikes, like a hedgehog piled up on the ground like broken tiles. The buildings that were originally intact completely collapsed like dilapidated houses, gradually becoming history amidst the smoke and fire. Even half of the palace was blown away. It was slanted and looked like it could collapse at any time. This was not the worst. The worst was none other than the city guards in Royal City. Some of these people had already been buried under the rubble. Some were stacked together and fell to the ground like garbage. Some were still letting out painful groans, and some were simply motionless, their lives unknown. This scene was like hell. Not long after, the palace collapsed as well. However, before that, a few figures flew out from within and avoided the collapsed palace. They landed on the ground in a scattered manner and looked at the scene around them. Some of the figures began to tremble all over. These people were naturally the only ones who had the ability to protect themselves from this terrifying attack. They were the stage 9 powerhouses: Guda, Kalunwil, Jebi, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino. Apart from these 10 people, no one else was unharmed. Even Jaffer had been carried out of the palace by Guda. However, Jaffer was also heavily injured and had fainted. As for the Type 9 powerhouses who had the ability to protect themselves, no matter how bewildered they were, when they saw the hellish scenes in the city, all their emotions were suppressed. Guda, Kalunwil, and Gubai all turned pale. King's City. Kalun seemed to have lost his soul. His eyes were unfocused, and his limbs trembled. King's City has been destroyed. Will and Gubai's faces were also filled with bewilderment and helplessness. Everything happened too quickly and simply didn't give people the chance to react. A second ago, everyone was still doing their own things in the palace. The next moment, they were greeted with a world-destroying attack. If it wasn't for the fact that the group of 9th-level powerhouses all sensed a trace of danger and promptly raised their defensive measures, they absolutely wouldn't have come out unscathed. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, as well as Yoshino, who couldn't bear to watch this hellish scene, all looked towards Kotori. Just as they were about to say something, they noticed that Coterie was looking at the sky solemnly. Their faces turned cold as they looked up. Only then did they notice something. In the sky, a person was floating in the air. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was wearing a beast hide with long, blood-red hair that reached his waist. Not only did he have a pair of blood-red wings on his back, he also had a long tail with a hook. At a glance, it was actually a scorpion tail. This man with a pair of blood-red wings and a scorpion tail, as well as a head full of blood-red hair, floated in the air above the capital of the Baruba Empire, looking down at the Type 9 powerhouses below with a disdainful look. His voice rang out like thunder. "Humans, your time of death has come." Hearing this, Gouda and Coterie felt a chill run down their spines. To be able to call Gouda and Coterie humans, to be able to float in the air and destroy the Baruba Empire's capital with a wave of his hand. There was no need to guess who this person was. "It's you." Gouda stared at the red-haired man. "Beast King, to be able to survive my attack. Humans, you have the right to know my name." The red-haired man laughed disdainfully. "Siaming. This is the name given to me by the great beast god. Siaming." Gouda grit his teeth as he hugged the unconscious Jaffer. He suppressed the anger in his heart as he spoke coldly. "To think that you would come out personally. Aren't you afraid that the guardian of my Baruba Empire will turn you into ashes?" "Turn me into ashes?" Siaming laughed mockingly. "Let's not talk about whether the guardian of your Baruba Empire has the ability to turn me into ashes. Human, why don't you get your guardian to come out and spar with me?" Gouda still wanted a bluff, but he was suppressed by Origami's calm words. There's no point in saying anything more. Since the other party came out personally, he must have known that the guardian isn't in the capital. Gouda, Kuin, Weir, and Jebi's hearts sank. Coterie glanced at the four of them, her casual words causing their hearts to tremble. "You have failed in your duties. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.